I'll call the Wednesday, November 30th, 2022 meeting of the Cumberland Planning Board to order.
Tell them to push the mic.
More, okay. Roll call, Ms. Vlasic.
Here.
Mr. McDonald.
Here.
Mr. Butler.
Here.
Mr. Scown.
Here.
I believe Mr. Bush is not here yet. Ms. Reese.
Here.
Mr. D'Ambrosia.
Here.
Mr. Costa.
Here.
And the chair is present. Okay. One mention at this point in time, okay, is that this meeting is also being held virtually on the Zoom platform. If you have any interest in an item or on the agenda, we will turn on your audio and promote you to a panelist as the item is called. If you would like, yes. If you would like, okay. If you would like to comment or ask a question, please raise your hand by clicking on the button labeled "Raise Hand" when the chairman opens the floor for public comment. Okay. We have a couple of items on the agenda before the main event. First of all is the approval of the planning board minutes of October 26, 2022 of the regular meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions? And if there are none, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Butler,
Second.
second by Ms. Reese. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. Item 3 on the agenda is zoning board of review recommendation, applicant Michael Taylor, owner Michael and Julie Taylor, location 39 Staples Road, assessors plat 44, lot 41, zoning A-2 with no public water or sewer. The applicant requests relief from the front yard setback to construct a shed. Mr. Modica. Is that a shed or is that a garage? Okay. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's on? Can everyone hear? Okay. So the applicant would like, I'm going to make this zoning recommendation and the next one real quick. The applicant would like to replace an existing shed that's on Staples Road with a new larger shed in about the same location. The shed will be set back 23 feet from Staples Road. Required front yard setback is 75 feet, so 52 feet of relief is requested. Property is constrained by wetlands and an existing septic system. The planning department believes this new shed will not detract from the character of the surrounding neighborhood. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan. And our understanding from the owner is that the wood shed that had been encroaching on the adjacent property has been moved by the owner. So we are recommending a favorable recommendation to the zoning board.
Board have any questions for Mr. Modica? Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion in regards to 39 Staples Road that we send a recommendation to the zoning board that the application is consistent with the goals and purposes of the comprehensive plan and include with our decision to the zoning board, our recommendation to the zoning board, Mr. Modica's memo dated November 23rd, 2022.
I have a motion by Mr. Butler. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Vlasic. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is Nathan Carr, Daniel Carr, 330 Scott Road, assessors plat 66, lot 60. Zoning is R1 with no public water or sewer. Mr. Modica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an undeveloped legal lot, non-conforming by area. The applicant would like to build a single-family dwelling on the property, which would have a front yard setback of about 17.4 feet. Minimum required setback is 50 feet, so 32.6 feet of relief is requested. Meeting the setback requirement is impeded by the relatively small size of the lot, also by wetlands, and by the proposed location of the septic system. Building the house, in the planning department's opinion, will not diminish the character of the neighborhood and is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and we are recommending a favorable recommendation to the zoning board.
Board have any questions for Mr. Modica? Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion in regards to 330 Scott Road that we send a recommendation to the Zoning Board of Review that the project as proposed is consistent with the goals and purposes of the comprehensive plan, and include with our recommendation Mr. Modica's memo dated November 23rd, 2022.
I have a motion by Mr. Butler. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Scown. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, before we get to the next item, my children are scholars at Blackstone Valley Prep, so on the advice of the town solicitor, I'm going to continue to recuse myself on this next item.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Oops. What did I do with my agenda?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm working with one of the interpreters right now, just to work out the Zoom interpretation.
Okay.
So if you just give me a minute or two, thank you. Thanks.
Shall we take a short recess? Everyone in agreement? Recess? Okay.
It's a regular person.
I'm gonna play you right now. Hi, Glenn. It's Shirley from Be More. Can I help you? Can I help you set up the interpretation?
Oops. I'll reconvene the meeting at 6:01 PM. Before we begin the next item, for anyone here who needs a Spanish interpreter, these laptops are set up for anyone that's here in the building, okay? So you can just go to that and they will interpret for you. And the same token, virtually, we also have an interpreter available to help anyone who needs help. So with that being said, I will open the public meeting for Major Land Development Revised Master Plan, project name Blackstone Valley Prep High School Expansion. Owner applicant, RI Mayoral Academy, Blackstone Valley. Location 65 Montgomery Street, Assessors Plat 2, Lot 3, and 5 Jones Street, Assessors Plat 2, Lot 158. The applicant requests master plan approval to construct a two-story addition to the existing Blackstone Valley Prep High School at 65 Montgomery Street, Assessors Plat 2, Lot 3, and create a parking lot and drop-off pickup area at 5 Jones Street, Assessors Plat 2, Lot 158. The applicant has revised the plan to include a pickup loop around the perimeter of the soccer field at 65 Montgomery Street. This item has been continued from the November 15th, 2022 special meeting of the board. Before we begin, Ms. Salvatore, you have a couple of things to talk about?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as I think all of you know, the meeting that we had on, I believe, November 15th was challenged with regard to the way we conducted the meeting. So what we did was we re-advertised in the newspaper. We re-noticed. We gave new notice to every single abutter who is entitled to notice. We are here in the largest venue available to us in the town. And I have offered to the applicant that they can put their entire presentation on again if that's what they choose to do. It's not necessary, but that's what we're not going to have a challenge based on the way we conducted a meeting. I want to make sure that that is not a valid challenge. So that's what we've decided to do. If the applicant wants to put on their entire case again, they can. I would ask you to take public comment. Obviously, you have taken it from individuals, but if there's anybody new that wants to give you public comment or give you public comment again, where I think that you should do that so that we limit any kind of legal challenge if there is one. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Salvatore. Mr. Modica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is the 10th public meeting for this project since we started November 2021 with the pre-application meeting before this board over a year ago, followed by 6 master plan meetings and 3 meetings at the technical review committee. First, I just want to address some traffic information that was previously presented. We've been shown on a couple of occasions drone videos of existing drop-off and afternoon pickup. And it's been said over and over that the duration of the afternoon pickup is only about 7 minutes. And that might be true, but what the drone video shows is not the plan that is being presented. The existing pattern is random pickup on side streets. The proposed plan is completely different from that. It's 3 separate pickup loops with all vehicles waiting in the queue. Besides, afternoon pickup does not begin when the dismissal bell rings and end when the last vehicle leaves the site. It starts when cars start filling Broad Street trying to get to the high school, through the period when vehicles leave and when they all converge back on Broad Street. All of this cumulatively adds to the total duration of traffic. And I want to point one thing out about parking, which we haven't talked very much about. But the number of parking spaces has significant implications. Parking is directly tied to enrollment, and our zoning requires 5 parking spaces per student. At 550 students, they need 110 spaces. The traffic study says 120 spaces are needed, 30 for student drivers, 90 for faculty. But they're proposing 136 parking spaces. So at 5 parking spaces per student, 136 spaces, what the planning board is voting on is a high school that, by right, can have an enrollment of up to 680 students. Now, I'm not an educator. I have no idea what the appropriate enrollment should be based on number of classrooms or class size. But as a planner, I can tell you that approval of this plan is, in effect, approval of a school in compliance with zoning that can have an enrollment capacity of up to 680 students. Remember, the charter cap of 2,360 covers all 6 of BVP schools. Any one school can have any enrollment number, as long as the sum of all the schools stays under the cap. Of course, charters can always be amended. This past spring, RIDE put out an RFP for new student seats, where a charter school can request an increase of enrollment. This year, 2 charter schools applied to raise their enrollment cap. And with RIDE, there's really no public process. Planning board won't review it, and neither will the town council. It just needs the mayor's signature, and it's RIDE's decision alone to approve any further expansion. So were that to happen, were the enrollment to expand, that would throw the traffic study out the window. Projected school traffic would increase an additional 20% of what's been stated, and the increase from existing site-generated traffic won't be 38% more vehicles. It will be closer to 70%. Now, I want to put to rest about who said what when. At the last meeting, Josh Falk, the head of school, said it's always been BVP's intention to reach the charter cap. That's news to us, because that was never stated to the planning board in 2016 when they voted for a 330 student school. At that 2016 master plan meeting, the applicant and their consultants said over and over again, 330, 330, 330. At that meeting, when asked directly if there was a plan to expand the high school, the applicant's attorney, who's here tonight, said quite clearly, there is no plan to expand the high school. But a 2018 letter from PAR said differently. It said the school was designed and built knowing it was constrained. BVP knew all along they wanted to expand enrollment and they needed a bigger high school. Starting in 2015, before they came before the planning board, kindergarten enrollment jumped over 30% to about 220 students per year. And it's been that way for 8 consecutive years. If BVP becomes so successful, so desirable a place to learn, students won't want to leave. Attrition rates can decrease and more students will want to continue enrolling and attend the high school. How are they going to control how many students enter the high school? How are they going to ensure that enrollment never exceeds 550? After getting approval for the high school, which opened in 2017, they continued with this increased enrollment and took on more students than they could handle, all the while knowing they didn't have a high school that was big enough. They purchased additional land with no project approvals. Right now, BVP has reached the point where there's no more room at the high school. And based on past decisions and knowingly enrolling students into a building they knew was insufficient. So since day one, since the first meeting more than a year ago, both parties have clearly understood and agreed that the sole issue of this project is traffic on Broad Street and within the neighborhood. BVP's only assignment was to create a traffic and circulation plan that would not negatively impact this neighborhood or Broad Street. In that task, they failed. This planning board decision is not based on emotion. It's going to be based on the merits of this project. It's going to be based on findings of fact. And the first finding is that this project is inconsistent with the town's future goals and inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. Secondly, the second finding is that the project will have significant neighborhood impacts. The planning board has heard expert testimony from the applicant's traffic engineer and the expert peer reviewer. Planning board has made their own observations about traffic in the neighborhood, and the planning department has laid out its conclusions and observations in 3 separate staff reports. And we have concluded that BVP has not been able to minimize or mitigate its project impacts, and the planning department recommends the planning board deny the master plan application.
Board have any questions for Mr. Modica? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Partington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, as the solicitor has stated, and she advised myself and Mr. Rizzi this as well, that we had the opportunity to put our case on again, so to speak, and this rescheduling of this meeting and the re-advertising was a result of some allegations that the meeting was improperly held. I guess I was not involved in that decision. My recollection, first of all, let me say that it's our intention not to restate our case again for the record. I'm going to simply incorporate, restate, reallege, incorporate all of the previous testimony that was taken by this board onto this record as well. However that will be done, whether it's just, I look at this as more of a continuation from the last hearing. I believe when we concluded, before we had the issue with having to reschedule, well, we actually rescheduled anyway tonight for the sole purpose, I think, of your deliberation and any closing remarks that I may have. So I believe that public, and Mr. Chairman, however you want to handle this, however the board wants to handle this, that I assume then now that since there's going to be more public comment, that would be taken. I could make my closing remarks and the board could then have its deliberation. I did have my experts, although I'm not going to put my case on again, I do have my experts present tonight as a courtesy to the planning board in case there are any other questions they have in the course of their deliberation. I will state, the only thing I wanted to add, and I mentioned this briefly at the last meeting, if you can recall, that I had secured a letter from the inspector, the fire inspector, Mr. LaValle, on the NFPA compliance with respect to fire department access for the amended master plan. And I have a letter which I'd like to present. I made copies. I can present it to Mr. Stevens or to Mr. Monica, if that's okay with that.
Please do.
So again, I don't know if what your preferences are as far as procedure, but if you want to take rest of public comment first for listening to me, it's totally up to you.
Okay. I'm asking the board if they have any questions at this point in time for Mr. Partington. Okay.
And again, the experts are here for their deliberations, any questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So at this point in time, if there's anyone that wishes to speak, either for or against this proposal, please come to the podium, give us your name and address for the record.
Mr. Chair, do you mind also mentioning that we do have Spanish translators
I
via
did.
Zoom?
I did
Okay,
previously.
Okay.
Okay.
For people who want to, for comment.
Again, as I had already reiterated, we've got laptops here for anyone who needs an interpreter. But if there's someone here that wishes to speak who needs an interpreter, okay, we have one available for you. Just raise your hand and we'll.
I'm sorry, and they can also come to the mic. The interpreters are virtual via Zoom, so they'll hear it and they can translate remotely too.
Before you begin, I just want to note for the record that Mr. Bush has entered the, used to be the chambers, but the building at 6:15 p.m. Sir.
Okay, my name is George Amaral. I've been in this town since 1969, and I have a business in Broad Street for 32 years. And in the past years, Broad Street been congested, which, as you all know, the traffic in the morning and in the evening, which notice on my business, clients come to me, says, we can't come to your store. in the morning, that's the time that the contractors like to get their supplies and go on their business. And we started losing business because of traffic. And I have a couple of pictures I'd like to present to you,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
Could you also tell us what address you're,
159 Broad Street.
okay, and that's your business address?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
Rogers Ace Hardware.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. These are the pictures that I took. One I took today, the other one the dates are dated, and this is every day in the morning and in the evening. That's my concern with the traffic of Broad Street as is. So if we're gonna add any more to it, there's no way into PVP, and back there, other than you come through Broad Street. There's no way. That's my concern.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
Hi, excuse me, hi. My name's Paulette Pawson. I live at 500 Mendon Road in Cumberland. I'm a great-grandmother to a senior at BVP who has been a student since K. When she graduates in June, she will be the second class to go from K to 12th grade. I'm disappointed by the fact that this expansion has been delayed for so long, and worse is at risk of not happening, while applications that clearly increase traffic have been approved, most notably in Hope and St. Pat's. I was surprised at the last meeting how the board was unaware that some children will need to find another school due to the lack of space if the application to expand is denied. Those are the rising 8th graders going up to the 9th. I'm asking everyone to put aside like personal feelings, bruised egos, because I know a lot of these meetings have been a little hot and heavy, and just look at the facts. At the last meeting, Mr. Modica's statement was directed at the ride down Broad Street, describing it as slow, using multiple adjectives. Another board member also commented that he too experienced a long drive. However, as Mr. Thompson commented, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, what one perceives may not actually be real. I submitted a spreadsheet of travel time to and from school for your review. This information was obtained through a Life 360 app. Mr. Modica was supposed to email it to you, so I don't know if you received it. For those of you who aren't familiar with this app, oh, by the way, I have some copies here if anybody needs it.
I don't know if I have a copy.
Everybody okay? You want one? For those of you who aren't familiar with this app, parents use it to track their teenagers. You can locate your teen by street and building. You can also track how fast the driver is driving. It alerts you if your teen is involved in a crash. So it was my great-granddaughter who installed the app on my phone so that I could relax knowing when she got to her destination without waiting for her to text me. This app holds data for 30 days. I just realized it a little while ago that I had access to this cumulative data. The Maps app on the iPhone estimates travel time from 500 Mendon Road to BVP High School at 12 minutes. As you can see on the spreadsheet, page 1, showing travel to school, there are mornings when MJ arrives at school in under 5 minutes. I attribute those 5-minute trips to not getting any red lights along the route. Sometimes she just goes right through to school. I think there are about 5 traffic lights between our home and school. Travel time on the report at dismissal is very interesting, and it is the main focus. I highlighted times that were after the regular dismissal and list travel times of 16, 13, and 18 minutes. Those were later in the day, and some of them might have been around the time that that man was complaining that evening traffic or late afternoon traffic is bad. Additionally, I also found it interesting when it took 9 minutes to go from Town Hall last week at the end of the meeting to home. It took 9 minutes, which is above the average for going to school with uninterrupted travel. If I were to remove the trips that are not at the regular dismissal time of 2:40, the average travel time drops to 8.3 minutes, which is just 90 seconds above the average morning travel time of 7 minutes. It's a 90-second average increase. This is documented on the app. It was also reported at one of the meetings and documented on the drone video that dismissal time at the high school is about 8 minutes. And as my granddaughter MJ would say, teenagers don't want to be at school any longer than they have to. So they move out fast. I'd like to review a portion of Mr. Tim Thompson's presentation to you from the last meeting. He displayed a slide that estimated 57 cars at dismissal with the expansion. Mr. Thompson reported that he visited the school at dismissal and counted 41 cars. He also counted the number of cars from the drone video of April 2022, which I believe he said was around 41 cars. So with the current number of cars at dismissal of 41, he calculated only an additional 16 cars with that expansion. That's if I understood him correctly. I think I did because I took notes, but I could be off a little bit. So I want to know how a projected additional 16 cars at dismissal, and not all of which will be traveling down Broad Street in the north direction, will have a significant impact on travel. In addition, at a prior meeting, Mr. Thompson commented that an increase in cars due to the expansion would not significantly impact the neighborhood's traffic, and that the improvements planned along with it, such as the new traffic lights, would actually make it more efficient. There's no way to know for sure what the precise number of new cars will be, as many of the students will be using busing, which according to Mr. Thompson has already increased 8% now that we're kind of in the rearview mirror of COVID. But still, some students stay after school for extra help. They call them office hours, where students who need a little extra, algebra work or other work can stay, and they take a bus later in the afternoon. There's a lot of kids who walk home. There are some who carpool. BVP always encourages carpooling if busing doesn't work for families. Others participate in school sports and clubs, and some, like my granddaughter, drive to school and leave the building at their own leisure. BVP allows seniors to drive to and from school, but require proof of license, proof of valid registration, and proof of active insurance coverage. And a big factor to remember is that 2 of the 4 sending districts drive away from Cumberland. They're not going down into Cumberland. They're going to CF and Pawtucket. So that's at least half of them. And if you go back and you look at my spreadsheet, you will see that quite a few days where my granddaughter has business south of Cumberland. So she doesn't even go down Broad Street towards Woonsocket. She cannot be the only one who drives away from Cumberland for appointments and other things. Please remember, too, that BVP produced a list of at least 12 local businesses that either support the expansion or had no issue with it. Some of the businesses expressed a hopefulness of increased business. Certainly fast food, bakery, and a general store would certainly benefit by the teenage consumer. The planning department speaks of revitalizing the Valley Falls area, which the high school expansion would be one step in this process. I don't think I need to say this, but revitalizing a neighborhood also includes schools. The expansion would be a huge improvement of what is now just a blighted lot, and it would be an improvement just like the current high school is from when it used to be the fair. Most improvements planned for revitalization will have a traffic impact, whether it be Ann and Hope plans, the plans for St. Patrick's property, or the plans to renovate the historical building near Town Hall, and any other plans to bring economic development into the Blackstone Valley area. The traffic impact from the high school is very brief, especially if we can get home in 8 minutes. That means we're off of Broad Street in a very short period of time. The Ann and Hope plan in particular may have an impact on student population, and this is where BVP can lessen the impact of an increased student enrollment. Another presentation to remember before the vote is taken is that of Doug McLean, a planning expert who is well-known and respected by all of you. You should have this report, but let me bring to your attention some of the highlights that stood out to me. Doug McLean said that this area is good for school, as it would improve the area, create a nice buffer between the residential and the commercial industrial zones. It would increase foot traffic, which is a goal in revitalization, as well as add support and good paying jobs. Mr. McLean said schools are good neighbors. He's right. I know this personally, having lived directly in front of a school for 11 years. He also said that there is an expectation of increased vehicle activity in this type of zoning urban area of residential, commercial, industrial space where BVP resides. Finally, it's hard to imagine going down Broad Street without difficulty because it seems like it's been almost 2 years of road work, sewer work, installation, and then we're going to be looking at probably paving. It's been painful for everybody, for businesses, for us taking our kids to school. It's been rough. But that's going to be in the past because it's going to be nice once it's done. BVP High School is a pleasing building, and the soccer field is such a breath of fresh air. And similarly, there is no better use for the current rundown lot than to add the small expansion. It should be considered part of the revitalization plans for Valley Falls. On a personal note, it breaks my heart when I saw the plans to reduce the regulation-sized soccer field to just a field in order to create a loop that may or may not even be needed. My great-granddaughter, MJ, was on the 2021 girls soccer team that brought home the Rhode Island Interscholastic League first place Division IV banner to the school. Both the girls and the boys soccer teams made it into the finals this year. Both teams have excellent participation. I saw that for myself at the girls soccer games, where BVP had a full team of subs compared to other schools who only had 1 or 2 subs. BVP administration had to make a hard decision based on need and rightfully prioritize expansion over soccer, education versus soccer. Similarly, your decision is education versus traffic, as was mentioned by that 8th grader last week. However, I would like to suggest that we could keep the soccer field if we had all 9th graders bused to a depot spot that would reduce the cars at the high school, but I know it's late for that. BVP is great for our community and our society. Did you know that BVP has a program for 18 to 22-year-olds? It is called the Advancement Academy, and it is a program fully run by BVP, their staff, their enrollment and funding. Space is currently rented at the Y right now. The students are young adults who IEPs provide them with a legal right to be educated by their school district until age 22. Currently, only students who have gone to BVP for high school are enrolled, but BVP hopes to be able to open it up for other districts to place students in the program if it is a good match for their needs. BVP is working hard in attending to the needs of all children and even young adults, a significant benefit to our community. While I appreciate the concern the planning board has surrounding the traffic that the expansion may produce, it should be kept in mind that BVP has taken every possible precaution to make the effect of such little to none. BVP has performed analysis and studies that further solidify the fact that the additional traffic will have very little impact. Any traffic from the high school will be short-lived. So this is what your vote means tonight. If you deny this application because of traffic, which may cost a driver an extra couple of minutes or 90 seconds to drive down Broad Street, then by doing so, you deny families school choice. You'll deny children a good quality education. Because BVP is a small school, you will deny children a chance to receive more individualized attention. You will deny our children a more diverse experience, both culturally and socioeconomically. You will deny a significantly anxious student a chance to attend a smaller school. It is well documented that children's anxiety is even worse since COVID, and it's real. And you will also be splitting up some families that have multiple children, as some children will get denied moving up to the high school because of the denial of this expansion. Not every child at BVP has the benefit of the Cumberland school system. Or you can approve the expansion and give children and families school choice, a school that is dedicated to filling a need with the Advancement Academy, a chance in some cases for a better educational experience, a revitalized lot which has been and continues to be an eyesore, a chance to draw young families to Cumberland because Cumberland clearly demonstrates a commitment to education, having good public schools, good private schools, and a good charter school, thus increasing property values. Finally, and most important, you will give a chance to grow our most important resource, our children. I implore this board to approve the BVP's high school application. The expert opinions support this vote. It's the right thing to do for our children and is the right decision for Cumberland. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. McDonald?
thank you. I just want to correct Ms. Pawson on one point. I had it in my remarks that I'm going to make, but I removed it. We can't stop an applicant from presenting witnesses. The first witness to be presented when Mr. Michael Kelly was the attorney for BVP was a gentleman from Peer Corporation, the consultant who's still with them. I don't believe that he's one of them. He's the one that appeared that evening. The second one was Josh Falk. It was late. It wasn't the first item on the agenda, so the meeting ended. Beginning in April, BVP had the floor. We could not stop them from presenting witnesses. And for months running, around 10:30 in the evening, the chairman was forced to continue the meeting to the next month. I think in June, when I arrived home, I said to my wife, we're being filibustered, and I can't for the life of me figure out why. We didn't finally get a chance to even think about deliberating until 2 weeks ago, when the attorney representing BVP, Mr. Partington in this case, finally said, we're done. And now we're in the public comment section of the proceedings. So I agree with you, it's been drawn out, but you'll have to talk to BVP officials to figure out why. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Anyone else? Sir?
Thank you. My name is Kevin Harrington. I've lived in the area for 25 years now. Paulette, thank you. I'm sorry. I'm very unaccustomed to public speaking. Paulette, thank you. It's very difficult to follow you. I have no spreadsheets. I have nothing like that. I have two daughters, go to BVP. One is a graduating senior, one is an 8th grader going into freshman year, hopefully next year. I'm not going to try to extol the virtues of BVP because better minds than mine have stood up here and told you all about the school and how great it is. All I can do, and I think Paulette did it as well, is remind you that the decision you're making tonight isn't the same as putting a Dollar General on Menden Road. This impacts hundreds of families and their futures, their future plans, the futures of their children, where they're going to go to school, what they're going to do, whether to stay here in Cumberland, in CF, in Lincoln, in Pawtucket, what have you. Traffic on Broad Street. Traffic on Broad Street is horrible. It's no better or worse than any other place in Cumberland right now. The traffic on Menden Road is horrible. The traffic everywhere is horrible. There's construction everywhere. Businesses, it can't be helped. It is what it is right now. But also the traffic on Broad Street isn't that much different during pickup and drop off for BVP than it is at any other time of day. There's a little bit more, not nearly as much as you get up on Menden Road at the high school at Cumberland High. I personally can go from the intersection of the light at Menden Road and Broad Street have my kid dropped off, back out and around onto Broad Street again, heading to CF, 6 or 7 minutes every morning. I mean, the traffic is going to be what it is. However, the plan that the BVP has put in place theoretically would mitigate the problems that you see now and theoretically mitigate the problems that you see in the future with the traffic. Broad Street, eventually, the construction's going to stop, everything's going to smooth out. There will still be a slight impact to the surrounding neighborhood around the high school. But the plan they put in place, sacrificing the soccer field, making the moves, could work. The argument seems to be, in the meetings that I've sat through, that there's a belief that the parents won't follow the rules. And like everything else, you're never going to get 100% cooperation. You can't get 100% cooperation driving through Walmart, whether the entrance and the exit, who's going to come in where and who's going to do whatever they want to do. But we at BVP know what we have. We know we're lucky. We are always willing to work with anybody to get whatever needs to get done. And so I don't believe the traffic would be that big an issue. Now, from what I read, from what I understand, and from the staff report, the planning department finds that the effects of proposed traffic circulation on-site and increased off-site traffic on adjacent and nearby streets are not adequately mitigated. The proposed development will have a negative impact on the built environment and is inconsistent with the goals and purposes of the comprehensive plan. Now, I actually read the comprehensive plan, which is quite a document. But in the comprehensive plan, Cumberland is committed to working cooperatively with the public schools, private schools, and other education providers, including adult education and ECL programs, in meeting facility needs, fostering a safe and healthy school environment, and recognizing the critical role that all types of education play in Cumberland's vitality and character. A vote for this plan is not a vote against the comprehensive plan. It follows the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
Good evening. My name is Karen Jatil, and I'm a resident of Cumberland, and I have a sixth grader at BVP. A couple of weeks ago, I sent an email to the planning department and board members regarding my thoughts, concerns, and questions about the BVP expansion project. The town planner was kind enough to reply to my email, directing me to the master plan and minutes of meetings on the planning board's webpage for further information. So I went to the webpage and read through the master plan, minutes of meetings, and watched the meeting videos. While I was there, I also did the same for the master plan review for the St. Patrick's project, a project this board has recently approved. As you know, the location of the St. Patrick's housing plan is 0.4 miles from BVP High School. As I previously stated, the St. Patrick's project was approved. BVP's has not yet been approved and not recommended by the planning department. The planning department's recommendation to deny BVP's application are mainly centered around proposed traffic issues and the inconsistency with the goals and purposes of the comprehensive plan. Regarding traffic, BVP provided a traffic study with results comparable to the St. Patrick's project. Additionally, for the St. Patrick's project traffic study, the planning board requested the planning board requested they additionally analyze traffic patterns during the school period peak times, even though that was not a condition of the St. Patrick's project. The results, as stated on their traffic report, says the 7:15 a.m., the 7:15 to 8:15 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. peak periods have slightly worse levels of service than the school peak periods. I repeat, the 7:15 to 8:15 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. peak periods have slightly worse levels of service than the school peak periods. In addition to that, their traffic report states there would be 358 total trips, additional vehicles, traveling daily in and out from St. Patrick's. The additional vehicles resulting from BVP's expansion plan is considerably less and only occurring twice a day and only during the school year. I'd also like to read a statement from the Planning Department regarding BVP's master plan. It reads in part, traffic. Existing traffic flow on Broad Street is already severely impeded during morning drop-off and afternoon pickup. Adding more vehicles to Broad Street during these peak periods will only cause traffic flow to further deteriorate. Now, there was nothing even close to this statement regarding traffic in the St. Patrick's project. Even after knowing there would be an additional 358 vehicles on Broad Street daily produced by that project. There are several other inconsistencies regarding traffic of the two projects, but it is glaringly obvious that what is considered a traffic detriment to BVP's plan was of little concern in the St. Patrick's plan. Therefore, recommending denial on the premise of traffic doesn't seem fair. Besides the issue of traffic, the inconsistency with the goals and purposes of the comprehensive plan is another reason the Planning Department recommends denying BVP's request for expansion. In the comprehensive plan, specifically relating to Broad Street, the challenges paragraph reads in part as follows. Challenges. The dense residential neighborhoods are in the lower income brackets, and about 1/4 of the residents do not have high school education. Access to employment, affordable, safe housing, and health services is limited. Business owners work hard to be successful entrepreneurs and bring their culture to the area through their ethnic restaurants and local shops, but they face obstacles because of language and cultural differences. When I read this paragraph, I could not believe what I was reading. It was as if it was a part of BVP's philosophy. BVP was established to address the very challenges the Cumberland Planning Department outlines in its own comprehensive plan. The description of lower income brackets, no high school education, limited services, language and cultural differences. This is exactly why BVP exists. To give these people opportunities. BVP could not be a better fit for the comprehensive plan as it relates to Broad Street. The final reason you recommend denial of this project that I will address tonight is a statement that the project would provide negative neighborhood impact. When living next to a commercial or industrial property, you have no control over the things that are associated with these areas, such as traffic, noise, pollution, and commercial lighting. BVP has been a good neighbor. They've built a modern, attractive building and provide excellent upkeep of the property. On most days, by 4 or 5 p.m., everyone is gone, leaving a peaceful, quiet area for the surrounding neighborhoods. The administrators are approachable and willing to resolve any issues that neighbors may have. If BVP were forced to rebuild elsewhere, who's to say what would move in next? You as a resident have no control as to how that property could be utilized. So when you have a good neighbor, you want to keep them. To conclude, the new administrators at BVP are doing all they can to make this right. They've been bending over backwards, willing to cap student enrollment, sacrificing money, resources, and a soccer field because they will do whatever you need them to do. They will do whatever it takes to make sure every child knows they will have the opportunity to remain in the BVP community from kindergarten through high school. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we continue, just an announcement. If there's anyone here that anticipated coming here to this meeting for the storage rental of America on Industrial Road, J.J. Duffy on Mendon Road, Macari Solar on Martin Street, and Polyrack on Highland Corporate Drive, those items have been moved to which date, Mr. The 13th?
November 13th at
December 13th.
6:30 at Town Hall, Town Council.
Okay,
chambers.
that's been moved to December 13th.
Mr. Chair, there is a virtual person who would like to speak.
Okay, certainly.
So Noemi Q, I'm going to promote you to panelist.
Hello?
So Noemi, I'm going to promote you to, there, well, here, I'm going to try this one more time. So Noemi, you just got to accept being promoted. Okay. Do you want to, if you don't want to speak, then I'm going to lower your hand. Okay. So I didn't mention this earlier. If anyone out there on Zoom would like to speak, there is a little icon at the bottom of your screen. It's a raised hand icon, and you just need to click that and raise your hand if you would like to speak. And there is a Mr. Cruz. Mr. Cruz, I'm going to promote you to panelist.
Hello, Mr. Cruz?
He's in.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Could you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Jose Cruz. I live at 82 Jenks Avenue in Central Falls, Rhode Island.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I am the father of two scholars. I have a son who's in the 6th grade, and I have another child who's in the 3rd grade. I consider myself blessed that my kids go to VVP. I would love for my kids to go from K through grade 12 at VVP. I understand that if this expansion is denied, my kids are in jeopardy of not making it to the high school because, again, it's a limited space. I understand that there's a lot of things at play, but at the end of the day, this is for the kids, and the kids are the future. You know, we are building a school. We are trying to, help the kids, right? We're not building a 7-Eleven or anything else like that. We're trying to expand to the school. I drive through Broad Street every day to bring my kid to school, and the reason for the traffic is construction. Now they're working on the sidewalks next to the street. Before that was the pothole. It's the construction. The issue is not the school. And again, I wasn't planning on speaking today, but I just want you guys to know that there are a lot of families that are, dependent on you guys to approve the expansion. All right. And that's all I wanted to say, guys. And have a good night.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak?
I had said at the beginning of this meeting that anybody can speak again if they choose to.
Hello, Stephanie Gemsky, Silver Street, former District 1 Town Councilor. Just two quick things that I wanted to add on top of everything. As of Monday, parents were still parking on Jones Street despite the promises. Parents were complying with parking rules from the last meeting. And then again, I want to reiterate, this is not about the school itself or what the school does for the students or the education that it provides or the love that the students and the parents have for the school. It's about the location of the school and the impact on the residents that live there. Our reality is our truth. You can't deny that. At the end of the day, everyone here goes home outside of the neighborhood. The impact on the residents' lives are just as important, and it would be wrong to deny that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Mr. Chair, we have Shannon who would like to speak. Shannon, I'm going to promote you to panelist.
Hello, Shannon?
She just joined. Shannon, go ahead. Make sure you're unmuted.
Hello?
There's like in the lower left corner of your screen, there's a microphone. Make sure it's not crossed off.
Yes, thank you very much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Can you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Certainly. My name is Shannon Pelletier, and I live at 8 Kilburn Street in Cumberland, Rhode Island. I first
Thank you.
wanted to thank everyone who has presented for BVP this evening. I think you've spoken eloquently and have brought forth a number of points that I had to speak to the committee about. I am not going to repeat them because I want to be respectful of everyone's time. What I did want to reiterate is the agreement that BVP has also put forth, stating in writing that they would not look to expand their student enrollment in the future. Again, it is another line item that BVP is willing to work with the committee and the town to make sure that we are compliant with what is agreed to in the future, meaning your decision, if it is for the expansion of BVP, that they would stay within the student enrollment limits. We cannot go back and change anything that was stated in the past. However, they are willing to put this agreement in writing, so it will not be anything different than what is agreed upon. I'd also like to note there is a business owner who presented a photo from today's traffic. And I understand, having family business in town for many, many years, how frustrating it can be and how difficult it is to run a small business. However, it is not appropriate at this current time to base an opinion off this morning's traffic. There are traffic cones and major construction in this area that is adding to the traffic at this point in time. Another speaker earlier did state right now, Broad Street is in a mess. We have side streets that don't even have areas that can have sidewalks paved properly. There are ramps that go into the road where they should have been cut out into the sidewalks that haven't been addressed. So this isn't an accurate reflection of the traffic that will be once the construction is finished. And that's all I had to add to tonight's meeting. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Edith would like to speak. So Edith, I'm going to promote you to panelist.
Hello?
So you're on, Edith. Make sure you're unmuted.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Could you
Yes.
give us your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Edith Ibarra, and my address is 305 Rand Street in Central Falls, Rhode Island.
Thank you.
First, I want to thank you all for allow us to participate and give our thoughts to all of you. So I am a mother of 5 kids. 2 of them just graduated from BVP High School. 1 last year and 1 this year. And I'm really proud because both of them are in college. And I'm very thankful because this is thanks to all the work that all of the staff, teachers do at this high school. And as many of the families in this school, I am a low-income family. And if this is not passed, this opportunity will be denied to many kids in the future, counting 2 of my 5 kids that are not yet in high school. One of my kids that graduated in 2021, it's going to Providence College with 100% scholarship, 100% scholarship in Providence College. I'm really proud and thankful for that. And this is an opportunity that could be denied to other kids if this is not passed. Everybody deserves a great education, a good education, no matter where you came from. So I'm here to ask to please pass this project and be a part of this great opportunity for all of these kids. There's a lot more important things to think about than traffic. I think everybody is capable of handling traffic in this point of our lives. We are adults, we can handle it. And we are in the other side of the road. Our kids are just starting this long way of their lives. Let's give them a chance. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if anyone else wants to speak who is virtual on Zoom, you can hit the raised hand icon button at the bottom of your screen. And we have Raina. Do we have her? No. Raina, I'm going to promote you to panelist.
Hello?
So Raina, you're on now. You're a panelist. Make sure you're unmuted.
Rock's mom spoke. She spoke very well. Rock's mom? Mm-hmm. You're on mute, right? Which one? Huh?
Raina, did you want to speak to the planning board?
I want, is there a comment? Like, I want to put a comment.
All right, I muted her.
Okay. Anyone else?
So I know Raina's still there. Raina, there's a microphone at the lower left-hand part of your screen. If you want to make sure that's not crossed out, that will unmute yourself. Okay, go ahead.
Hello?
Go ahead. Raina, did you want to say anything?
Buenas noches. Yo solo tengo 2 palabras para hablar y decirles que por favor piensen como padres, o tal vez ya sus hijos ya salieron de la high school, pero tienen nietos y quiero que nos entiendan a nosotros como padres. Y otra cosa que yo lo que he visto que la escuela más organizada con el tráfico es BVP. Yo vivo cerca de una escuela donde la verdad no son nada organizados con el tráfico. Tengo ya varios años de vivir acá, pero ya nos acostumbramos a que es 1 hora o menos, es en la mañana y en la tarde y ya pasó todo, o sea que es poco tiempo. Yo tengo 2 hijas y yo llevo una para la high school y yo siento que el tráfico es lo que están arreglando la calle. Eso es lo que está haciendo tráfico. Si ustedes no dieran esa autorización, el tráfico va a seguir. Entonces, yo lo que les pido, por favor, que nos ayuden y que nos aprueben todo esto. Gracias.
Thank you. Do we have an interpreter?
Yeah, it's Patty or Ruthie. Can you translate that for us, please? So are you still out there? Patty or Ruth? I think we're set up. So, okay, Ruthie, you have your hand raised. Can you not speak? You are a panelist. And you're not muted.
Hello? Hello? Can you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Are you speaking, Patty? Is that you, Patty? Ruth? Ruth, we can all hear you.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else on Zoom who would like to speak? Please click the raised hand icon at the bottom middle of your screen. Okay, Mr. Chair, there are no more speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Motiger. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak? Going once? Going twice? I'll close the public meeting at 7:04 PM and restrict. Mr. Partington? That's fine.
Good evening, and first off, again, I started out the last presentation by thanking everybody. As Mr. McDonald and as one of the speakers pointed out, this has been a long process. It's been a long year for you guys, a lot of special meetings, a lot of big projects. And so certainly your willingness to meet and spend extra time is not unnoticed or unappreciated. And that brings us to tonight, and it sort of dovetails with, I'll refer to statements made at the outset of the last meeting from Mr. Kutu, where he eloquently and accurately stated the board's constraints with respect to what they needed to consider in reaching their decision. He stated that in light of the emotional nature of the testimony of all these speakers, that he wasn't indifferent to that, or the board was not indifferent to that. However, that there were requirements that the board consider only the evidence and the hard facts for them. I've had the good fortune, and I can say that unequivocally, the good fortune of appearing before this board for many years. And I do believe that you are not indifferent to the plight of any of these parents and students who are concerned about the future of education in the BVP system. And going back to the statement again, you are to decide based on the evidence that's been presented. And heading in that direction, I want to address a couple of matters. First off, Mr. McDonald made a statement about the length of time this has taken, and I don't disagree with him at all about the number of meetings and the time it's taken. And I think actually, as a result, or through that whole period of time, I think kudos to both parties. And I say that because my reading of what's transpired over the last year or so has been that the planning department would come up with deficiencies or problems with what they saw, and BVP would go back to the drawing board and do the best they could to accommodate those alleged deficiencies. And that's really, I think, again, I think it says a lot about both sides coming to a final decision. Also, I wanted to address this issue that seems to be just this things that just won't go away, is this suggestion that there was some sort of underhand, not underhand is a bad word, that's not the right word, that there was some secretive intent, maybe even bad faith on the part of BVP going forward with respect to enrollment, this question of enrollment. First of all, let's dispel any issues about what the cap could be for 3 schools or about what could happen with the additional parking spaces by stating that we have agreed and will agree again tonight to cap our enrollment at what we say it's going to be, as we've indicated in the documentation and the master plan documents that we've presented. Also, as far as who said what to whom about what, I don't even have to give my own opinion. I would refer to what I received this afternoon from Mr. Monica, from which he read today, about what was said about the increased enrollment. I noticed that certain portions were highlighted. There was a whole paragraph, however. And in that paragraph, I, on 2 occasions, state, yeah, if we expand, we're going to have to come back to address zoning deficiencies, and we're going to have to go before you, most likely, for a master plan, like we are today, for major land development. Twice I said it. Nowhere in 130 pages of transcript was there any discussion about capping as a condition. There were many things discussed about conditions, nothing about capping. Your enrollment, even, and Mr. the architect, he said, well, if we do expand, yeah, this is how we're going to do it. We'd have to go up. So the enrollment thing, I just can't even wrap my head around that, because I don't know where everyone's coming from on that. There was nothing nefarious about it. This wasn't a Trojan horse that BVP rolled into this with the intention of duping everybody about going forward with an expansion. I just wanted to review also some of the testimony, and again, this is my recollection of the testimony. We don't have a record, obviously. The record and your recollection is what counts for purposes of your vote. But also there's the idea of sort of springing this on everybody, this increased enrollment. And by the planning boards, or the planning department's, own admission, this was first brought to their attention back in 2018. And there were several votes taken by the board, by the BVP board, of which the current mayor is a member, which discussed and approved going forward with this expansion. And as far as going back to 2016 again, and talking about what the intent might have been, I believe at the time, what we could afford was the school for 330 kids, which is what we said it was going to be. There's no question about that. Funding, we can't go back out to issue a bond like Cumberland can. We're bound by the legislature and what we can pay for, what we can afford at the time. So we're at a position now where we went out and we purchased additional land in order to accommodate the expansion, like anybody else would do under the same circumstances. There was talk about the fact that when the town was approached, initially, that the planning department advised that under current conditions, what I referred to in my comments in 2016, that there would be lot coverage issues and there would be parking issues. Now, it was noted that there was property right there that could be purchased, and that was discussed with the planning department. And in Mr. Stevens' defense, he made it clear in writing, actually, in a response to Mr. Chiappetta at one point, that the fact that he pointed out that that property was available didn't signify, a blanket approval by the planning department or the board going forward. In fairness, John, on that issue. So I don't want to dwell on the enrollment issue, except to the fact that it seems to be just this major thing that keeps being brought up and thrown in BVP's face, that we knew this was coming and we duped everybody. That is just garbage. That's not what happened at all. I was there, and I don't operate that way, and neither does BVP. The last meeting, let's talk about enforcement. I think that everyone, at least I believe, everyone agreed that, and I would look at VHB's report and compare it to PAW's report, that there really wasn't all that much difference. There was a lot of talk about enforcement. From the police department, there was talk about enforcement. Well, Mr. Falk, the principal, testified, and I want to just go over a couple of the things that he testified to from our recollection. He testified that arrival is drawn out more than dismissal because people start trickling in around 7:17 and the majority of students are dropped off by 7:50. He said the majority of students are dropped off between 7:20 and 7:40. He talked about how an event was held for neighbors to voice their concerns, and only 2 neighbors showed up. And I added to that I also scheduled a meeting at the old Santander Bank back in 2016 for the original approval, and 4 people showed up, 2 of which were the Almeidas, who sold them the property that we're talking about tonight, the additional lot. At that meeting, the people who did show up were given Mr. Falk's personal contact information if they had any concerns, and no one has contacted him. He talked about dismissal. He talked about it beginning at 2:38 and that it was much more concentrated than the morning drop-off. All of the students come out of one of 2 front doors. There are at least 4 people out at dismissal, 1 or 2 patrolling on Jones Street, and 1 or 2 out by the buses in the south. He noted that some of the cars parked along Maple Street were related to businesses across the street. He stated that dismissal was fairly quick, and the hold time window is typically between 6 and 7 minutes on a regular basis. He also indicated that there were several staff members assisting students during dismissal. At least 1 is on Jones Street, and there are usually 1 or 2 where the bus area is, and others scattered throughout. He also went on to describe what the intent would be going forward. Another thing to remember too is that, and as Parr testified to, and one of the things to keep in mind is, we never asserted that the traffic was going to be any less. We thought that the status quo could actually be improved by this loop system. The triple loop that's now that was the basis for the amendment to the master plan submission. There was also a testimony from Michael DiMatteo, who said, and this is previously to the last meeting, and this goes again to enforcement. The plan was to have 8 people outside that are staffed on duty to coordinate with the student resource officer for directions and training. They will be stationed at entrance points to our parking lots, not on town streets. There will be 3 parking lots, and BV will assign parents to lots. People will typically be assigned by grade. The monitors will ensure that the people are going to the right place. The students with parking passes will display them on their dashboard so they can be identified. When there are special events, BVP will address with families where they should park because BVP controls a few hundred spaces within a 4-minute walk. Accidents and incidents are very rare. That was also, as was also noted, by the way, in VHB's report, that there were no complaints with respect of violations with respect to traffic. There has never been a problem with parents driving during drop-off or pickup, and there's never been an incident where a parent did not listen and comply with the school traffic monitors. BVP has agreed to propose conditions in connection with the master plan application, and he listed them. There would be a sticker program for parents, the color of which will designate where they have to wait for pickup and drop off between the 3 locations. There will only be 30 student parking passes issued at the high school. Let me go back for a second. The existing parking on the soccer field, the area on Jones Street that will be created under the new plan, and of course the parking lot adjacent to the building. And that goes to the 3 locations and the stickers that were going to be provided. There will only be 30 student parking passes issued at the high school. The lease for Cadillac Mills, which is a 4-minute walk from the parking lot to the school, has been extended to 2034. That location can be used for additional event parking. BVP owns a parcel of property at the end of Jones and the corner of Broad Street. This lot, if desired by the planning board, could be used for additional parking. It is approximately 150 feet away from the school. As an alternative, if the planning board does not deem this parcel necessary for additional parking, the academy would donate the land to the town for possible use in its current efforts to revitalize and beautify Broad Street. If it was donated to the town, it could be used for municipal parking for local businesses, or a small park could be created on that property. He testified that BV appreciates and understands the great concern that the board has relative to enforcement for traffic issues. He stated that while they will have 8 monitors in place in totality, concerns have been raised as to parents ignoring the direction of monitors who do not have enforcement authority. As such, BV's board has passed a resolution to hire a full-time police officer who will be at the school from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. every school day. This SRO will have the power to enforce the location of parents at pickup and drop-off, and also enforce the no parking along Jones, Wacondry, and Maple Streets along the school property. BVP, if the board directs, will ask the town council to post no parking signs along that area. In addition, the police officer will be on site to coordinate stacking in the parking lots. As a further condition, BVP would agree to a condition that the 3 charter schools in Valley Falls would all continue to dismiss their students at staggered times, so there are no 2 schools which are dismissing at the same time. At the request of the solicitor in the planning department, BVP offered a binding agreement that not only memorializes numerous enforcement mechanisms, but also offers a reserve for potential fines. BVP believes that this is redundant since the town has all of the enforcement sanctions at their disposal through municipal and superior courts. With respect to concerns relative to the expansion of student enrollment, as I stated at the outset of my remarks, BVP is willing to contractually cap its student enrollment. As such, the relevant state law as to the procedure for expansion will be irrelevant. Another issue that I wanted to address was comprehensive plan conformity. We've got traffic, and we've got comprehensive plan conformity. And as you've heard many times from many different people before you, the comprehensive plan is the roadmap, no pun intended, and the Bible. And I'd like to address that and the comments made with respect to the comprehensive plan by the planning department. Number one, this edition will be zoning compliant. And as previous speakers have indicated, and I would incorporate their remarks with respect to the education element of the comprehensive plan and how it supports the BVP essentially. In fact, as indicated by Mr. Modica in his report, one of his staff reports, the comp plan touts the presence of BVP in Cumberland as a high-quality school of choice. He also noted, this is Mr. Modica, that Cumberland is committed to working with the applicant and doesn't, per se, object to the expansion, but rather the associated traffic impacts in the community. No references are made with respect to the comprehensive plan discussion to the transportation element of the comprehensive plan, which includes roads and traffic, traffic volumes, traffic count data, and accident data. No references outside of a support for BVP are also made to the education element. All of these are economic development related issues. And I don't see any supporting data for this. Basically somehow, while realizing that the school itself can't be an economic driver, it's a school. So therefore, it's going to adversely impact the businesses on Broad Street. Well, I don't think that's been supported anywhere on the record at all. We had someone testify that there's a lot of traffic on Broad Street. You go to Cumberland High School, you go to community school, you go to the other middle school up on Whipple Highway. I've driven through all of them. It's just traffic is associated with schools, and a lot of people aren't taking the bus these days, it seems. The economic development items that were, again, talking about preventing sprawl. I mean, this is not urban sprawl. I mean, this is a densely populated area. This is not more intrusive uses that are spread out into rural areas. That's what sprawl is. That's not what this is. Also, architectural continuity. Well, I mean, if you recall in 2016, the planning department was extremely concerned about the architectural integrity of this building and how it was going to fit in with the Broad Street and the Valley Falls area. That's been done. So clearly any expansion is going to accommodate that concern as well. So I think that's misplaced. It seems that, at least in our position, BVP that is that this all boils down to, because if you look, well, and again, let's go to, and I go back to enforcement, because if you look at basically the testimony of your peer review, and I'm again from his report from 10/17/22. First of all, he noted that there have been no enforcement actions by the town, no violations, no communications, and one neighbor complaint. Then there was his report, and I'm going to cite some of the highlights from that report. VHB concurs with future trip generation projections. VHB concurs with the traffic capacity analysis performed. The SRO and the monitors will need to monitor the queues at the site driveways and make adjustments as needed to ensure that backups that impact traffic do not occur. VHB would note that the proposed improvements and design plans were developed using pre-COVID traffic volumes. It should be noted that traffic volumes are continuing to evolve to the post-pandemic new normal volumes that incorporate a hybrid work environment. That's employees work part-time from home and part-time in the office. Once the RIDOT Broad Street regeneration project is completed, the traffic signal operations will be adjusted and optimized in the field to provide the best operations based on current traffic volumes and patterns. This optimization process will not only consist of adjusting traffic signal timings, but will also consider the time periods when coordination should be implemented. PAR concurred with VHB's assessment. VHB agreed that a traffic signal could be installed at this location if RIDOT agrees with PAR's justifications. I would also note that again, that part of what has been proposed here is to remove a lot of the traffic and put it on site with the addition of the parking lot and the triple loop system. Mr. Clinton from VHP also noted that SRL would be a big benefit to the enforcement issue. Again, what I read in VHP's report all dealt basically with enforcement. There was no substantive disagreement with the conclusions of PAR. In fact, Mr. Clinton noted that the students at BVP are typically more compliant than the schools because of the honor it is to attend that school. He did note there was a drop in the level of service during the morning and afternoon peaks at Maple Street at the Broad Street intersection. However, there was no impact to Broad Street in the level of service. And the wait time, and you'll see it in PAR's report, is less than 1 second of a delay with this new proposal, which was not contested by VHB. Again, I'll go back to how I started this statement or my conclusion, the back and forth between the planning department and the representatives of BVP. There were several problems that the planning department had with PAR's engineering reports. They said we want to get peer review, an independent traffic person to get involved. BVP agreed. Or the cost of it, and this is what has come of it. You have a situation where you don't have any substantive disagreements. You have an enforcement issue. You're not an enforcement board. To decide this on what may or may not happen with enforcement going forward, I don't believe is appropriate. You have the engineer's traffic reports, and with all due respect to the planning department and Mr. Modica, who I often compliment on his work, he's not a traffic engineer, and what his conclusions are with respect to PAR's engineering reports shouldn't be considered. We're willing, I think it's plain, for all the things that have surrounded this application, which we don't need to go into, okay? It's been a lot of, it's borne a lot of contention and back and forth and a lot of intense debate. But what it boils down to, in my mind, is from what you have heard, very simply, is it's about enforcement. And I think that BVP, as they have done right along, has come to the table and said, what do you want us to do? And every time there's been a positive response. We've offered a list of conditions, and we're willing to adhere to those conditions. It's true, and the gentleman stated earlier, I believe it was Mr. Harrington that said, you know, you can't control what everybody does, unfortunately, but you can make the best effort possible. And I also have to admit, and as someone who is the representative for a lot of big developments that take place in the town, I think it is important that there are other issues on Broad Street that are going to have substantial impact to the amount of vehicles you're going to see on that road. And they've been approved. And I understand we have statutory requirements with respect to a percentage of minimum housing and whatnot, but we're talking about education here, and forget about the emotion. I think that if you do just look at what's been presented, the bottom line is to what's been presented by your own peer review and the evidence, then I think that this conceptual master plan, which we all know that's what it is, and the solicitor was correct when she read early on in her remarks before I got involved, there was a question about the limitations of a conceptual vote, and I agree that all these things were appropriate to consider. She was correct about that. But it is a conceptual plan, and it's master plan. And I think at this point, given what you've heard and what's been presented, that we should have a positive vote. Thank you. Thank you for all your time again that you spent on this.
Thank you, Mr. Partington. Does anyone on the board have any questions for Mr. Partington? Mr. Scown?
Okay, I have a number of questions, but first of all, what is the exact enrollment right now at the school?
The exact enrollment, my understanding, is a little over 400, which exceeds the 330.
Correct. So that led me to believe that that was something that was done without our knowledge and in the past. I'm just taking it from the standpoint, you're trying to tell me certain things will and won't happen on certain events.
Right.
And when something like that happens, you get suspect. So I'm putting that out as a concern relative to what you've been saying about not only enforcement, but also the enrollment. I mean, what's going to happen?
As a matter of fact, as you know, Mr. Scone, you were the one who brought that up in 2016. And I knew that this argument from when I got involved and I read the back and forth. I knew obviously, and I'd spoken to a couple of members before I got involved and asked their opinions about certain things. And I knew this enrollment was an issue. But again, I think it was important because there seemed to be, not to pick on Mr. D'Ambrosio again, but he was correct that there was this problem of perception. And I found that just from reading through everything, that there was this, in talking to the parties, knowing this board, knowing the planning department, knowing the solicitor's office, and now getting to know the BVP people, I really thought there was this perception problem that was just, it was unduly put on this whole back and forth. So what you say is correct. As far as right now, it is over the 330. We came before you in 2016. I believe Mr. McDonald raised a question about, because the initial project was to come down, I think we moved, a story, we were supposed to go 2 or 3, and we moved 1, and he questioned whether the 330 could still be accommodated with the reduction. That was his comment. I believe Mr. Bush made a comment as well, and I think Mr. Costa made a comment as well about, going through the ranks when you're, going through lower grades and how they estimate future expansion. I just think that again, given the way the financing works with these charter schools, and given the fact that, those comments, that's why I was really surprised to read them, because today in what I received this afternoon from the planning department, because, they speak for themselves. I had no reservations about suggesting that there may be an increase. And I said, and if we expand, we're going to have to come back to you for approval. And as a matter of fact, I believe I actually cited lot coverage and parking issues. So, I talked about the planning board, and I was sincere about that. I think that you're not indifferent to the plight of these people at all. But by the same token, I would be remiss if I didn't also say from the other side, from the BV people, you have incredibly committed, dedicated people to their mission. And there was nothing, Mr. Scown, I can assure you from my conversations back in 2016 and now getting back involved at the present, that would suggest that any time that, look, let's just tell them we get to 330 now, we'll come back. Once we got it in the ground, they can't refuse us. That never took place. At least not in my presence, it never took place. And we never hit the ball about that. This wasn't a Trojan horse,
No, but how did it get to over 400 without anybody else knowing about it until recently, as far as the planning board is concerned?
Right. Well, I think that's one of the reasons why we've gone forward with the expansion.
Well,
That has exceeded. I can't argue with that.
First of all, I have to say that I'm very impressed by the passionate pleas and the testimony of all of the parents and friends. And there's nothing wrong with the quality of the school in my mind. And I don't think anybody here is questioning that at this point. But the way it was brought up and presented, I think had, in my mind, was a little suspect that some things happened that shouldn't have happened without more knowledge to at least us. For instance, if, increasing it to over 400, there's more parking issues regarding that because there's minimum requirements. It just gave me a bad taste for a little while. That was my issue with it. My other concern, you brought up enforcement and so forth. You had another gentleman that was a parent. There's a human element to this enforcement. Now, I went down Broad Street a number of times. I've been there with my wife later in the afternoon. It's an issue. People don't always follow what's required of them. And you know that, and I think most people do. Just this morning, you have two monitors over at the elementary school over near St. Patrick's, standing in the middle of the road almost, trying to direct traffic on Broad Street. It's a very, very congested area. I realize that. But if that happens at the school and they've got older kids, you've got, students that are driving, it's a little different issue than when you've got elementary kids school being driven by their parents. I think that's a little different issue relative to enforcement. So there's too many ands, ifs, and buts here as far as I'm seeing initially. I'm torn because obviously, like I just said, the quality of the school and what it does is wonderful. Now, another question in regard to the enrollment.
Yes.
How many students are from each community?
I don't know if anyone could address that. I don't know if anyone present can address that.
I don't know if anybody can. Mr. Falk is back there. Okay, so.
Did you hear that response, Mr. McDonald? Okay, the response was, without having the exact numbers, I don't want to misstate anything.
How about, can you give us a reasonable estimate?
Okay.
All right, we can wait to that.
Thank you, guys.
I don't want to take up all the
Sure.
time here.
Mr. McDonald, you had some questions?
No, I have some comments.
Okay, all right. well,
Mr. Scott, if I just address those things, and I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Scott. I think, again, the idea, it's again, and I really, honest to God, I don't want to pick on Mr. D'Ambrosio again, but what he said was very telling. I mean, it was. And I think it really goes to the core of this. And you're saying that, well, maybe it's not all perception. I think that's what you're telling me. Maybe it's not just my perception. Maybe it is hard evidence in the fact that we are over enrollment, whatever that may be. But I mean, right now, you've got a situation where we came to the board, we had 330 students. There was no intent at that time to go above it. Now, back as far as 2018, less than 2 years after the 2016, as Mr. Monica has indicated in his staff reports, and has attached, I believe, correspondence, that supports it. BVP came back to them and said, look, we need to expand. So it's kind of between the rock and the hard place in this. I mean, if we wouldn't have said anything, that would have been a problem. And because we did, someone can say, well, see that? You came back right away with an expansion. So,
That's not, I understand that issue as well. But I mean, when you go back to 2016, one of the major issues was traffic and enforcement. And then you increased enrollment, and that didn't get resolved really. And now we're at that issue where we're adding, hundreds more students, right. And we got all these studies, and it gets very difficult to say which one is going to work properly, which one isn't. And that's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's right
understand.
or wrong, but the point being is that you can't keep just adding people and not dealing with the issue right away.
And that's,
And I
okay,
think that's,
okay, I got you.
that's what got.
I understand, because obviously that's what we went and did. And as the traffic study or the the testimony was that the status quo was going to be improved. There was never any pie in the sky testimony about, well, in the future we can reduce traffic by adding more students. I mean, that certainly would be a reach. But it was, look, the status quo, we're going to improve on that. We're going to take more cars off the side streets, off the main streets, put them onto put them onto to the site itself. So again, there was, but my biggest problem with it, understand, Mr. Scull, my biggest problem was to suggest that at some point that we said, we're never going to expand. Because that not only suggestion, it's the actual statement of the planning department. That we basically made that representation, which is completely false by any stretch, by the actual, what's in those documents is false. We never said that. And again, I'll refer to the long discussion. You guys have read it probably, the transcript from back then. I mean, there was a lot of discussion about the entrance to the bike path and making sure that was all taken care of, about the architectural design, a lot of in-depth discussion, a lot of DPW stuff we went over. And no one, and all the conditions that were imposed, none was you cap enrollment. This approval is conditioned on you capping enrollment. That was at master, preliminary, and administrative final. That was never done.
I'm not questioning that there's a cap.
Make sure, if you're going to speak, make sure your microphones are on and you're close enough to the microphone so that you can be heard.
Mr. Chairman, for
Mr. Stevens.
point of information, my office was informed in mid 2018 of BVP's intent to expand, but there was no, it was an intent, there was no meetings, and there was no conclusion. And as Mr. Partington said, that in no way did this office ever claim that there was a by right opportunity, because it had to go through the planning board.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah, I don't believe that this board ever anticipated that we would be here now looking at an expansion of the school and realizing that the current enrollment that was presented to us of the 330 has already increased. So we never, I think I can speak for the rest of the board, that we never anticipated that we would be here looking at higher enrollment at the high school.
Again, if it's one thing, and I understand, it's one thing to say that you said 330 and now you're above 400. I understand that. But again, there were nothing in the remarks that were made at master or preliminary that would have said to you, we're never going to be back. In that one paragraph that Mr. Modica pointed out, I said it twice in one paragraph. So I don't know where that's coming from.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Salvatore.
before Mr. Partington got involved, there was statements made that you knew we were coming back. You knew we were coming back. Mr. Stevens said, we did not know you were coming back, which was a true statement. You knew in 2018 that we were coming back. That's what the conversation was about. That in 2018, yes, they knew. That was after you approved the initial plan for 330 students. So I don't want this to get all about, whether they said they were coming back. They're entitled to be here asking for this. However, to make the statement, which was made early on, that the town knew, that is a misstatement of fact. They knew, this planning department knew in 2018. And that's really all that needs to be said about this.
But not.
It does, except it goes back to my rock and hard place argument. What if we didn't? What if we just came in now? And Mr. Scown could have said, well, gee, now you've been over 400 for 6 years. And now you're coming back. Where were you 4 years ago? So, my only point was this has been made an issue, and I don't know what was said to whom, by whom, when, what. All I know is what I see in documents. And I see in the planning board department's own documents, as Ms. Salvatore said, 2018, they came back in and said, we're going to expand. So before I get any more off track, which, and I don't mean to say that suggest we're off track, but I only meant as it pertains to Mr. McDonald's question, that's all. I've been given, the information I've been given was that with respect to the high school, that from Central Falls, there was, we have 29.6 is the percentage, Cumberland, 18.6, Lincoln, 7.5, and Pawtucket, 43%. And there's miscellaneous staff from different places.
Okay, the reason I brought that question up,
Yeah.
We talk about economic development. That's part of our mantra here, is to try to make sure that we have economic development in town properly. Here, you've got a number of students, more coming from out of Cumberland than in Cumberland.
Yeah.
So as far as the economic driver is concerned, you even admitted that the school is not really an
Well,
economic.
no, I didn't
driver.
admit it.
Well,
Planning department did.
well, it's not an economic driver.
Right,
And-
exactly.
And so that's another issue that we have to deal with from our standpoint. It's not an economic development.
Well, then how do you deny it based on its nonconformity with the economic development element of the comprehensive plan? That, I think that's, I see a disconnect there.
No, because it's not an economic driver because it's not producing income in the local area. And it's actually producing more expense to the town, whether it be for infrastructure or any other issue in regard to that. So that's where I'm coming from as far as a business standpoint.
Right.
To grow a school like that with all these other issues with traffic, it doesn't really bring anything to the town, which I disagree with some of the comments made by the parents and so forth. It's not bringing people in. Even one of the parents has said, they get in and out within 7 or 8 minutes. I mean, and they're out of town. So, I mean, that's really not an economic issue for us.
But let me just ask you, so I don't think anyone here, and again, if we can agree or disagree, because we don't have any statistics on who goes to the bakery, on who goes to CVS down the road, on who shops at the hardware store. We don't have any statistics on that. So if we don't, and we can agree that the school is not an economic driver, it's a school. So in my humble opinion, the only way that you can take the economic development element of the comprehensive plan and use it to suggest that this is non-conforming would be to suggest that it has a negative impact on local businesses, which brings you back to your traffic, which brings you back to your enforcement issue. And there's no statistics on that, Mr. Scott.
I understand that, but there are some comments from businesses as well as positive and negative. So
Right,
there is some
right.
negative comments from businesses that affect them. So, and again, we don't have the statistics of how much business they lost.
No, we don't.
And so, we
Or
have-
why?
We have to make a decision based on the facts that we've been presented over these last few months.
Exactly.
And it's difficult. I just want to say
No.
that. And like I said, I appreciate what everybody else is saying. I appreciate the way you're handling yourself. It's just that it's very difficult for us, for me personally, to make a decision on this thing because I'm torn between, like I said, the economic development, where students are coming from, what the expense is in the town, et cetera.
Yeah, we're all residents of the town.
I mean,
Right,
education's important. so-
No, of course it is. And I believe me, I know that you guys all feel that way. I don't doubt that for a second. I don't doubt that the planning department feels that way. But listen, again, to get down to what's on the ground, literally, okay? I mean, you've got Broad Street, which is probably the most densely populated area in Valley Falls, right? In the town, Cumberland, okay? As admitted, you've got a lot of situations I've personally been involved with before BVP even started, where a lot of the businesses on Broad Street couldn't bring in commercial. And I don't have the statistics with me on that, Mr. Scott. I know I've gotten a lot of calls about it. They want to go to residential because they can't get business in. Now, maybe through the planning department's efforts, I hope Broad Street gets revitalized. That would be great. But the fact of the matter is we have Broad Street and as I think eloquently stated by the people who spoke, you've got at least two very large developments right up the street on Broad Street that have been approved. Now, when you're looking at traffic at two peak times during the course of the day, as compared to Broad Street as a whole, and what the impact would be statistically from what PAR has said, and from which VHB, as far as I'm concerned, and you have to make your own determination from reading, has not substantively disagreed with. They've gone to enforcement. I would hope, and I have said this, and this is not a confidential communication, I've said this to the BVP people, that, I was very impressed, first of all, with the support they get from their parents. And I think going forward, that's going to have to be something that's going to have to be demonstrated in deed as well as in words, by following the rules. I thought Mr. Falk, I'm coming from his side of the field on this, but I thought he was very persuasive in demonstrating the commitment he has to making sure things run right there. And they're not going to run right every single day. Of course not. It's not possible under any circumstance. But I appreciate the comments, Mr. Scown. Thank you.
Anyone else on the board have questions for Mr. Partington?
Or anyone that's present. Again, I have the traffic people back here, just in case you guys have any questions.
That's Mr. Partington.
Sure.
What was the teacher-pupil ratio back in 16?
I don't know.
What is it today?
Do you know?
No.
Okay, I don't, and I'm not being flip, I don't know.
Can you find out for us?
If anyone can present those numbers.
I'm curious. And the other thing too, is you mentioned about the June meeting back in 16. Here's a transcript from that day, okay?
Yep.
And.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I was too far away from it. In this transcript back in June 29th of 2016, on page 4, it did state about the building capacity of 330.
Yes, it
Now,
did.
my question to you is, why 6-7 years later is it an issue? And this was typed and given to anybody who wanted it, and all of a sudden it comes up to be an issue.
That's a good question. I'm asking the same one. I don't know why it's an issue either, because I had no illusions at that time about, I didn't think it was an issue. They said, what if you expand? The question was from Mr. Scown, what if you expand? What's going to happen? The architect said, well, we really, it's going to be kind of a pain in the ass because we're going to architecturally to go up, but we'll do it, and this is how we're going to do it.
So if this 330 was wrong back in 16, why is it we find out?
Why is it wrong?
You stated that it was inaccurate.
When did I say that?
What did you, when you referred to the 330 as being a number that is
No.
inaccurate, what did you mean by that?
If I said that 330 was not an accurate number, I misspoke because, I presented the case, and Mr. Scown is saying that, this is confusing to me, guys, because Mr. Scown just got through saying that you insisted 330 and now you're over 400. And now you're saying that I never said that 330 was inaccurate. So I just don't even know how. All I know is that at the time, the number of 330 was presented, and that was presented to the planning board. And in that document, which I've read also, there was a lot of discussion, Mr. Costa, about everything, including traffic.
114 pages worth.
Right. And so, and never in there was there any statement about, well, we're never going to expand. To the contrary, in an honest response to Mr. Scown's questions, I anticipated that if we were going to do that, we'd need zoning relief, in that we would certainly need your approval for a major land development with an expansion. So that's what, I agree. I don't know why this has become such an issue unless it directly relates to this, this perception, again, that BVP just hides the ball. And that's why I was just a little ticked off about that because that was not our intent at all. And I think you have to take my word for it. Read the transcript.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, just to be clear, and Ms. Salvatore made the point, that number 330 was presented when the school was originally proposed.
No question.
Okay.
No question.
And no discussion was, well, what if this, we end up with 500 kids? Because it was approved at that point in time
Yes.
with the number 330.
Right.
This board never anticipated that BVP would come back to us at some point in time, okay, and say, we have an increased enrollment. We never anticipated that, but they got their approval back then, and we gladly gave them that approval. And
No, but Mr. Coote, if you to say that the board never anticipated it, with all due respect, okay, I don't know if you've had a conversation or if that night, I didn't see it anywhere, or I don't recall it, where the
Correct.
board said, we don't anticipate you coming back.
Oh, correct.
Again, as a matter of fact, again, I would point to it again for, how many times I've said it, read that paragraph.
Oh, yeah.
It says,
I
expand, so there's no mystery there. There's no hide the ball.
No, because it was never really under discussion at that point for the initial approval.
No, exactly.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, that's my point.
Right.
So again, I'm just trying to refocus this because
I think it's
it really doesn't matter whether you knew or you didn't know. They're presenting an application that you have to look at today, and you can approve it and you can deny it.
Correct.
You can do either.
That's fair.
So
That's correct.
I mean, you're looking at it, this application, as a first application. You have some history with what's going on in the area. You didn't have any knowledge of what traffic was going to really be like back then.
True.
Now you do. So I think we're getting wrapped up in this, who should have known when and what. It doesn't matter, because this is an application that you're reviewing tonight and over the last year, and you've been presented with a lot of evidence, and it relates to this application. So BVP also knew, or they should have known, that this was not a guarantee. Just because they're there now doesn't mean that they're entitled to expand. So that needs to be said as well. This is a new application on a new project, and that's what you're looking at. And I hope that makes things clearer.
I appreciate
Agreed.
that. I appreciate that.
I'm sorry, that
Ms.
was the
Salvatore.
point that I was trying to make.
No.
Maybe I wasn't making it clear
No,
enough.
I
But
appreciate
I think what we keep hearing over and over is that we should prioritize education over the neighborhood. And I'm not giving my opinion, but when any developer comes in, you have to look at neighborhood impacts on the use, whatever use that is, whether it's a plaza or a residential multifamily development or a school. That's what you're looking at. The impacts on the neighborhood, whether it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, whether it meets zoning requirements, whether it has appropriate access. That's what you're looking at. You're not looking at whether the use or the lack of the use or the lack of the expansion is going to somehow affect people that are using that property right now. That's not part of your deliberations. And that really needs to be said.
Well, no,
Understood, thank you.
By the way, let me just say that, first of all, I agree with everything Ms. Salvatore said, except that this feeling of entitlement, I don't know, that's probably her opinion. But the point is that I didn't make this an issue, okay? I didn't make what happened back in 2016 an issue. The planning department did, and I am responding. What did you get today, this afternoon at like 3 o'clock? We're talking about you represented, the basis was 330. That's why I'm answering it. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't. And as far as prioritizing or placing education above effect on the neighborhood, I'll go back to what I said last time. You did have people object. There were people that did speak against this, okay? But you look at the valley and you look at how populated it is. And we'll go back again to Mr. Falk's testimony about his neighborhood meeting when 2 people showed up. And my meeting back in 2015, when 4 people showed up? Has the town been inundated with traffic complaints? I haven't seen them.
Thank you, Mr. Partington. Does anyone else on the board have any questions for Mr. Partington? Okay, thank you. Staff comments, Ms. Salvatore?
Mr. Chairman, one of the issues that I think you probably want to ask Mr. Partington about relates to enforceability, the fact that BVP is offering an enforceability agreement, and this office and the solicitor's office recommend against that this project should, that the town should not be entering into such agreements that require the town, puts the onus on the town in perpetuity, forever, to enforce and to have some sort of fine situation. The fact is that if this was a private property owner, then the town would have the ability to put a lien on the property in order to have the conditions that the planning board puts on approval enforced. And the town just cannot do that with a quasi-public agency that is a corporation that is in the education business. It's just not tenable. So I think we've been clear that you need to be very careful about assuming that any conditions that you put on approval, if you so wish to, are not enforceable.
My understanding is that we are not quasi-public, we are public. Is that correct, Mr. Izzy? We're public. Okay, all right. And my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the town asked for a presentation of enforcement agreement. And
No,
that's
that's
true?
not correct.
Okay.
It's not correct.
That was offered, and they presented it, and I never even looked at it, because for exactly what Mr. Stevens just said.
There were numerous requests for the enforcement agreement. There is the enforcement agreement.
Steve.
Everyone looked at the enforcement agreement. So I don't want to hear that this was offered by BVP. This was requested by your planning department and your solicitor.
Not accurate.
We wouldn't have offered it.
It's
Why
not
would we
accurate.
offer
Wait, you know what?
an enforcement
This is
agreement that had a
irrelevant.
$10,000 reserve in it? We wouldn't do that.
$10,000?
And it's not our, that's not our concern either, is enforcing the town's rules and regulations. If the town wants to enforce them, there are mechanisms to enforce them against BVP or against any property.
What are those?
You go to municipal court, you can issue a summons, you can go to Superior Court, you can ask for enforcement.
Right,
there.
and then what happens when you don't do that?
RIDE
What
and
happens when you
make-
don't do that? What happens when
you
you,
don't do what?
when the municipal court or the Superior Court issues sanctions and you don't comply? What happens?
Then there can be monetary sanctions, there can be masters
Against a public
appointed.
school? There's no way to lien the property. We went through
No, you
this.
can't lien the property.
So again, Mr. Chairman, what I would say is, this is somewhat irrelevant. I don't like being, I don't like it being stated that we are somehow misrepresenting the facts, but early on, we were talking about enforcement issues. We thought it would be a challenge. BVP offered, let's do a contract. We never asked for it, they offered it.
The town
I've
invited
never,
us to draft.
Steve, I'm talking right now, you can have your turn.
will.
So they did send me one, I'd never looked at it because of the reasons why Mr. Stevens, what he just said, it's virtually unenforceable. And again, this isn't even about enforcement. The project, I think Mr. Stevens has put it well, needs to stand on its own. You need to look at the evidence that has been presented to you. You have to weigh the credibility and the presentations by the traffic engineer, by your peer reviewer, by the testimony of residents, by your own knowledge of the area and your experiences. That's what you have to do. we shouldn't even be talking about enforcement. Frankly, when I go to a hearing and someone says, oh, you did this before you came to us, that's an enforcement issue. That's not for this board. So there's no way that I demanded an enforcement agreement.
If we,
And I think that should do it, Mr. Chairman. I don't think we need to continue with this.
well, I want to respond to what the solicitor said, because if we turn back the clock 5 minutes, it wasn't BVP that raised the enforcement agreement issue, it was Mr. Stevens. So that's what we're responding to, and we've had to respond to those types of allegations in the past, and we'll do it as many times as we have to correct the record. We didn't offer it, they requested it. We've sent it to them, and we never heard anything else about it.
And
So
again,
that's where it stands.
and again, they said they didn't request it.
Well, wait,
But the whole
doesn't-
thing, it doesn't
No,
matter.
it doesn't
No.
matter, I agree, because the bottom line is that it does stand on its own. With respect to the fact that your own peer review, again, there's no substantive disagreement about the conclusions of PAR, period. Comprehensive plan, which is the guidebook, all economic development issues. A lot of them just simply don't apply, flat out, read them, they just don't apply. But the ones that deal with the school itself and the impact on the surrounding community from an economic standpoint, where's the evidence of that? Again, this whole thing has been rife with just conclusions, unsupported conclusions. In my opinion, I agree that enforcement, it should stand on its own, and if you do look at the evidence, it does.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Stevens.
I would take a careful look at the conditions that BVP is offering. Take the SRO. They're talking about, $80,000 a year for SRO, but if those conditions can't be enforced, they could stop, they could not have an SRO in 3 years or 5 years if there's a change of administration there. There's no guarantee. I mean, maybe they would in perpetuity. Again, this is forever. You got to assume that the town cannot enforce these conditions, which include that relate to the traffic control, that relate to the issuing of the color-coded parent cars that have to go in this parking lot or that. Don't forget this. I think PAR's done a terrific job of trying to accommodate as best they can, but this intense use of this site for dropping off and picking up. But if the town doesn't have the ability to enforce any of these mechanisms, then you have to use your best judgment whether it's going to work.
And just to respond to Mr. Partington's comment, I'm trying to be neutral here because I obviously represent all of you, both the staff and the planning board. And obviously, Mr. Partington is here representing the applicant. It's important that you do understand that there were comments by the peer reviewer. I'm just putting it out there. I mean, it wasn't like the peer reviewer agreed with everything that PAR put out there, and they questioned some things. They questioned about human nature, and they're traffic experts. So I just want to put that out there, that is also on the record. It's not just this pristine presentation by PAR where everything's going to work out just fine. So there is another side that was presented to you by your peer reviewer.
Understood. Ms. Reese, did you have a question or a comment?
I probably have a comment, but I don't want to go back to the 330 number, but I'm going back to that. From the very beginning, I had many issues with the school, this St. Patrick's School, the traffic there, then the build of the middle school, then the high school. This has been probably one of the biggest issues that I've had is traffic. I've heard from the students and the parents and the grandparents about traffic is not an issue because we have construction on Broad Street, that's what's causing the traffic. I've been in the Valley 53 years, and I have never seen construction on Broad Street, except for now, really. And the traffic was there prior to the construction on Broad Street that just happened. This is not a 2-year, 3 years, it's not been going on for a long time, it's just now. So yes, it does increase the issues, but the issues were there prior to whatever's going on Broad Street. I think that this school is a great school. I'm one of them, minority group. I know exactly what they're going through. I know the importance of an education. I went through it all my life. I don't want to throw that in there, but I do know that is important. But I also know that the management should have thought of that before. They should, in my opinion, this addition should be not at that site. It should be a new school, a new high school, increase your numbers, go up with your numbers elsewhere, not on this site. This site is too congested. I know we have projects going there and there, and believe me, I'll be the first one talking about traffic, and I'm the first one objecting to a lot of these things because I will, and I will for many reasons. But we want to build this school somewhere where these students don't have to sacrifice the soccer field. It's important to them. They should remain with the soccer field. Build a good school, build a high school, accommodate all your students, accommodate them elsewhere. That site is, in my opinion, it's not a good site for the addition. I'm sorry, but that's my feeling.
Before we continue.
Ms. Reese, you've been consistent. Thanks for the comments.
Okay. At this point, if anyone has any questions or comments for Mr. Partington, okay, and if they don't have any more questions for him, we're at the point where we should be deliberating. You have a vote for Mr. Partington? Okay. Okay. So at this point, the board will restrict comments to the board. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have reduced in writing some remarks. It's going to take about 10 minutes or so to say them. I hope it meets my goal of clarity and concision. And I am going to go back to 2016 because by my count, there may be as few as 9 people in this room who know everything from the beginning. 6 of the 8 sitting here, Mrs. Salvatore, Mr. Stevens, and Mr. Partington. And I am going to get into the 303 at the beginning, 330 at the beginning, just for context. To put this proposed master plan in its proper context, it's necessary to revisit that June 29th, 2016 meeting at which the planning board heard the BVP application for master plan approval of the existing building. My copy of the transcript, 114 pages in length and exclusive of design aspects, the discussion essentially revolved around 3 obvious issues: student enrollment size, the resulting traffic, and parking. The board's discussion was lengthy with frustrating skepticism. On page 4 of that transcript, Mr. Stevens relayed to the board the BVP position that its application that, quote, the school building is designed for a capacity of 330 students, close quotes, while recommending the plan's passage. On page 17, referring to the building having 2 floors and not 3, it's a design issue. It's not germane tonight. Mr. Scott Partington, identifying himself as representing the contractor, Civic Builders, told the board, quote, the student capacity 330 is going to be the same, close quotes. On page 37 and 38 of the transcript, to confirm the 330 figure, Mr. Ken Bush of the board asked Mr. Jeremy Chiappetta directly if grades 9 through 12 would involve no more than 330 students in this building. Mr. Chiappetta replied in the affirmative, quote, "That's 9 through 12, right?" Close quotes. On page 36, Mr. Chiappetta said there would be a maximum of between 324 and 330 students when grade 12 came online, giving us class size numbers, a max of 29, he said. I couldn't reconcile those numbers. But this was only cleared up 2 weeks ago when Mr. Falk revealed that the plan all along had been to reach the charter limit, 2,360, in Valley Falls if necessary. Nowhere in that 114-page transcript can I find mention of that number of 2360. Until 2 weeks ago, the board was never given this context. During that meeting, no BVP official ever qualified this 330 figure in any manner as a first, as an initial, as temporary. It was 330 firm. To have stated that the school's enrollment would rise above 330 would have resulted in the plan's rejection. The vote to pass it was a narrow 5-3 vote for approval. 4-4 would have rejected the plan. To state this another way, BVP officials obtained a master plan approval by little more than the skin of its teeth. It was a cautionary tale, 330 and no more at this location. They decided to disregard it. BVP's charter allows them to educate in Pawtucket, Lincoln, Cumberland, and Central Falls, communities that have a cumulative landmass of 54 square miles. In the 4 years or so since BVP decided unilaterally to surpass an enrollment of 330, there have been possible purchases outside of Valley Falls, vacant land, buildings that could have been repurposed as a school, or buildings that could have been knocked down as the fair was in Valley Falls to build another high school elsewhere. But no, BVP returned here to the same location with a plan to eventually raise high school student enrollment by an additional 70%. Approximately 50% of all BVP students it educates are now housed in the 3 BVP schools in Valley Falls. These schools are within a half a mile of each other, and they sit on land that is less than 1% of those 54 square miles. Approving this master plan will increase BVP enrollment to more than 1,200 students in what is a dense residential and commercial area of town, and all of its resulting traffic must traverse Broad Street, whether a child is on a school bus or a privately owned vehicle. This is a pivotal issue for the town, and it's an adverse impact. No well-governed community in its economic development plan includes the willful exacerbation of traffic congestion on one of its main commercial arteries. As such, in my view, the plan is not consistent with the goals and purposes of the Cumberland Comprehensive Plan. I don't wish to harm a charter school. We find ourselves where we are this evening because of the behavior of BVP officials and not that of the town. You who are here, you hold your loved ones closely and you want the best for your children. A generation ago, I could be sitting there with you. In my ideal world, the children who attend a BVP charter school would be able, meeting academic and behavioral standards, to finish grade 12 and graduate with a high school diploma, never needing to experience the anxiety of a lottery. The 2016 final plan had conditions in it that had to be satisfied by BVP. I'll mention just 2 of them. The specifics of a parking protocol, a permitting system for student vehicles, and a traffic circulation plan, none of which was ever implemented, developed by Pear Corporation. The second is a staggered dismissal program that BVP never implemented. They were supposed to develop a program and present it to the Cumberland Police Department for vetting for beginning and then begin it at the beginning of the next school year. It didn't happen. So the uncontrolled pedestrian and vehicular movement and the parking violations, particularly dismissal that the planner saw and documented in a March 25th, 2022 memorandum to the board, authored with Mr. Stevens, and what I and other board members also saw in person, was no surprise. And these plans, they included no parking allowed by scholars in certain places. Scholars parking on school grounds in places other than these designated areas will be towed at owner's expense. students were supposed to get permission before they park in front of a resident's house. Anecdotal evidence from abutters that never happened. And these things would have been a final plan. As I understand it, they were obligatory on the town and BVP to meet. So what I'm saying is this plan developed by Pear, it had substance. We'll never know if 330 students and this being done the way it was designed would have worked. We'll never know. They blew by that 3 or 4 years ago. They're up at over 400 now. In the broadest terms, coming to an agreement with the town on this final plan in 2016 forced BVP to make the plan work through a max high school capacity of 330, a student vehicle permitting protocol, parking, and a traffic plan around the building to be monitored and enforced by BVP. And a staggered dismissal program was necessary. With the master plan application before us this evening, BVP's position is that 560 students will work with no staggered dismissal program in place, while a staggered dismissal program was needed to make a mere 330 students work, while the road grid remains unchanged in Valley Falls and Broad Street is no broader. Forgive the pun. This makes no sense to me. If the application is rejected this evening, you good people out there have the right to question BVP officials. With the narrow approval you obtained in 2016 for the existing high school, why did you, in the intervening 6 years, fail to find a suitable location elsewhere to build a high school for additional students and eliminate a lottery's possibility, including a suitable location, in my view, elsewhere in Cumberland? If it had no zoning or regulatory issues, if it had vetting by the planning department with a recommendation from the board to approve, I could have supported it. It's got nothing to do with a charter school. It's got to where they're trying to put it. That's my position. You could ask them, why did you choose to do it this way? Why did you insist upon hammering a large round peg into a small square hole? In following the path it chose, if this is rejected this evening, in my view, BVP officials have let you down. They have given you false hopes. Lastly, next to the last, this voluntary zoning code compliance agreement. This is one man's opinion, who's not an attorney. 2 weeks ago, they presented this proposal. To me, it was surprising and dismaying for the relationship between a charter school's management and a Rhode Island municipality. It's unfortunate because it suggests that one of the two will misbehave, so to speak. On page 3, it says that BVP reserves the right to go to court for any adverse ruling. So we're talking a lawsuit here, which is what the attorneys were talking about, so to speak, a few minutes earlier. As the money follows the child with charter schools, I think we all know what that means. Litigation will mean that the town will be paying its litigation expenses as well as a significant portion of BVP's expenses. Monies that come from Cumberland taxpayers to BVP. Money is fungible. In other words, if the town files suit against BVP, the town will be suing itself. If the town did file suit and was successful, what would be the result? Does BVP paying any monetary damages cause harm to the students, eliminating programs? There's an art room in the original design. Does the town put a lien on the high school building to satisfy judgment? What would it do with it? Could this threaten the actual existence of a charter school? Such questions and discussions like this reveal how nonsensical it all is. I don't see Cumberland suing a school. To do so would be ethically and morally problematic and certainly politically unacceptable. What would the members of the Rhode Island General Assembly who passed the Charter School Enabling Act and the governor who signed the bill into law several years ago think if they could see or have foreseen the situation that Cumberland and this board finds themselves in this evening? Would the bill have failed to make it out of committee in the House and or the Senate? If it did, there'd be no bill, there'd be no charter school today. If it did, would the act as passed have read substantially different? And this is a key to give a Rhode Island municipality something it doesn't have now, the leverage needed to force a charter school to honor the contents of a final plan and do so without harming students. One amendment, perhaps not, it wouldn't fly legally, would be to make a charter school's corporate officials and the members of its executive board and board of trustees solely and personally liable for any damages awarded to a municipality by a court in litigation. Lastly, I wanted this to work. I voted for this plan. More than that, I'm the member that made the motion. And it's frustrating and it angers me that, in my judgment, BVP bollocksed it all up. And you're going to pay the price if it fails, because you're not going to have a child that's going to be able to go from kindergarten to the 12th grade. They had all these years to do it differently, and they didn't. I can't for the life of me figure out why they're doing it this way. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Costa?
Mr. McDonald, well stated. Actually, I went through my presentation as you were speaking, and I've crossed out many of the items because I don't want to repeat them, as we asked parents and teachers and students that came before us not to repeat also. So if I mess up a little bit here, bear with me, because I'm going to try to skip over the things that I crossed out. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Poddington for your positive comments at the beginning of this evening. I'd like to comment on the students also. I found them sincere, honest, strong, not afraid to stand for what they believe in, and not shy to speak in front of a crowd of people. Teachers, I found them passionate about their school, willing to give up many nights to join us, about their jobs, students, and education. I compliment you on your support. Then the parents, they love where their children are for 180 plus days a year. They want their kids at BVP till grade 12. Support of the teachers. They are very supportive of the teachers in the programs. They gave up family time to come and support your school. A quote that was said this evening, they feel lucky. I feel that administration, the BVP officials, have done damage to their school by increasing to so many students. Hence the question about the teacher-pupil ratio, Mr. Poddington. I feel more than likely back in 16, your ratio was very low, and now much higher. They wanted a high school on a postage stamp. You got it. I know of several high schools in this state that sit on 26 plus acres, along with elementary schools that sit on 13 plus acres. If they wanted to expand, there wouldn't be a problem. If the expansion is not approved, now the possibility of implementing the lottery. So now you get student body upset and parents upset and teachers upset because you have to initiate this lottery because you have so many students over there and no place to put them. Administration, you need to think beyond a 2 or 3 year window. Why keep taking on students with the possibility in a few years you're not going to be able to keep them? They're not going to be able to go K to 12. So why do you keep accepting students? I don't understand. Makes no sense to me whatsoever. More of my reasons for objecting to this expansion, again, anticipated construction of the BVP, August of 23, and St. Patrick's, September of 23. Again, we go back, and I know it's been stated, the big issue of enforcement and SRO. Quite frankly, I think the likelihood of getting an SRO is very minimal. And the fact that you won't have to keep them for 2 or 3 years. You can just get rid of them because there's no enforcement on our end to make sure that you keep this person. I don't think it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. According to the findings of fact, the project will affect Broad Street according to the peer review. More students, more traffic. That's a fact. You have 4 schools close to one another in Valley Falls. You have congestion versus side friction of streets. Finally, my recommendation to BVP would be to locate and build another school in another city in Blackstone Valley, other than Cumberland. There are plenty of vacant buildings that can be converted. Maybe the building that you're in now could become one of the elementary schools. I don't know. And shift, excuse me, the high school somewhere else. End of my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Mr. Scown?
I just want to say that I was one of the original members that approved the original master plan as well as Mr. McDonald. I do echo quite a few of the comments that he made. I made my comment at the beginning that I was concerned about the exponential growth of the enrollment and the way it was done. And I think that was a discredit to the parents and so forth because of the administration. So I'm not in favor of this particular project at this point.
Ms. Vargas, anything to say?
I do. I like all the presentation from their parents, from their children, from BVP people. Okay, I think everything is beautiful. Okay, and but there is always but. I'm also concerned and about the Cumberland people that lives in this area to go through the problems that they're going already. And naturally with more students, like Mr. Costa says, more traffic, and I don't think they deserve that. So I don't think that this plan is very good to go forward. And I do also feel that they should look for a different area to build a different school there to enlarge and to accommodate the students. I think that'd be wonderful.
Thank you, Ms. Vargas. Ms. Reese?
Sorry, I think I already made my comments, and of course, I would have to say no to this project for the reasons before mentioned. And also, I do believe, like I said that many times, that it was an oversight. It was definitely a poor planning from administration. And we are definitely punishing the parents and the students for mismanagement.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. Okay. Steve, Mr. Ambrosia.
So in my day job, I'm a landscape architect. I work on projects that deal with schools, creating new schools on lots, doing ad renos. So, I understand where the folks from PAR are coming from. I'm not an engineer. I could never be an engineer. And I professionally trust the traffic engineers to both do my job and in this case. I believe that they've done, what has been asked of them, and, they were dealt the hand that they were dealt, and I think that they've done what they could do with it. As far as this school and its use, where it is now, with the population it is now, we talk about the status quo. The status quo is what it is, and, for better or for worse, it's working on some level. And then we talk about expanding the school and, another 100+ students, more cars, all of that. I believe that a school is a great use of an area. Obviously, as we've mentioned, it does not necessarily drive the economy, but it helps enforce and stabilize a neighborhood. There's a lot of great things about a school. And as we've heard from all of you folks, there's a lot of great things that have come out of this particular school. The problem that I have is that on some level, BVP had to have had hope at the very least from the very beginning that they would be expanding to the maximum population of the school. That being said, there should have been some foresight, some study done to look to see what that would mean in the coming future. Could the land that they own or possibly buy accommodate a larger school? Could it, provide their students with sports fields or parking, or circulation, everything like that? The fact of the matter is that I'm not sure where the decision came from, but moving forward, I just don't see how this is a viable use of this space. There's just simply not enough space to accommodate this many students in a neighborhood like this. As was mentioned by Mr. Costa, schools take up a lot of space. And as I've mentioned, I work on schools. Elementary schools with similar populations have exponential amount of acreage. And even when you take away sports fields and all of that, it's still a vastly different situation. So, it's unfortunate that that's where we're at. But that's where I'm going to leave that.
Thank you, Mr. Ambrosia. Mr. Bush?
Thank you. Just a few quick points because other board members have covered a lot of what I'm thinking. But Mr. Partington had mentioned that the number of 330 was just something brought up this week and put into the memo from the planning department. It wasn't really an issue in the past. Quite honestly, I can tell you when this expansion application first came before us, or came to my door, and I opened it up, the first thing I thought it was only 330. So no matter how you say that it states in the past meetings, the impression was given to every member of this board that the number was going to be 330. But that's not the total issue tonight. You also mentioned, well, as Mr. D'Ambrosio said, I think the members of the board of the school had to have known that they were going to have to expand. They have to look so many years down the road and see how many people are coming into the school and where they're going to put them and how large the high school is going to be. I think they obviously knew that and didn't let on that there was going to be some expansion. Also, the traffic engineer, I think you stated, or you made it seem that the peer reviewer really agreed with everything the traffic engineer said for PAR construction, PAR engineering. There's just this one statement that's in the record is that from VHB, the peer reviewer, he said it is unlikely that parents will obey traffic monitors and that it is quicker and easier to drop off and pick up in the street. So, I mean, and there were other statements like that that he disagreed with the traffic engineers. Lastly, I have had a problem with this from day one. I think a lot of board members have, even the ones that voted for it. Going back to the elementary school that was built on the playground was an issue for the neighborhood. I thought we were trying to put 10 pounds of mud in a 5-pound sack. A very small site. That type of school is something you'd see built in the 1950s in an urban neighborhood. But the difference is all the kids came from the neighborhood. They all walked to school. It wasn't much of a traffic issue. I actually walked to a school like that when I was in elementary school, but still, it's a very congested area to begin with, and I didn't think it was the area even for that school to be. And again, I think a lot of the board members kind of held their noses and voted for the high school and let that go by. And as I said, there were a number of people who thought this was the number. It wasn't going to get any bigger, so okay, we'll go along with it. But I think at some point, we have to look at both sides, not just the applicant and what's fair for them, but the neighborhood also. And I just believe, as I think my fellow board members do, this is just too much for this neighborhood to keep putting this on them, and more students in the school. So I don't think it's the right location for it.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. So now it leaves me. Okay. My colleagues pretty much laid everything out, and there is not much more that I could add. But the one thing that came to mind was Mr. Costa, having been an educator and a principal, made a comment about acreages of schools that he knows that have substantial acreage in parking availability. And that goes a long way. I had a question way back when about satellite parking that BVP uses. Okay, and initially we agreed to that when the high school was originally proposed. What comes to mind is it's nice to have a lease, and I understand that lease has been extended. But what happens when it's not extended, or the facility changes hands and someone else purchases the property with much different idea of what they want to do with the property? It kind of leaves BVP hanging with where they're going to park these cars. And the one thing that I had talked about a number of times was the impact on Broad Street, because everything dumps out on Broad Street. And I have knowledge, not necessarily on Broad Street, but a facility I worked at for 20 years. There was one way into that facility and one way out, and the traffic was a nightmare. And so I have personal knowledge of what it's like trying to, as Mr. Bush has mentioned, about 10 pounds of mud in a 5-pound mud bag. And a comment had rose about who knew what and when did they know it, okay? And what the future plans of BVP were. To state otherwise and make a suggestion is only speculative, okay? So I'm not even going down that road. But I was told that I was one of the ones that objected to the high school initially. But it got built, and that's okay. That's the process we have. That's the democratic process that we have, and I'm a firm believer in that process. But given the fact that we do have issues on Broad Street, I worry about cars stacked on Broad Street, which has happened occasionally. I don't think it happens every day down there at school, but I've been told that it does happen. And, you know, you only have, if I remember, a 20-foot wide travelway, 2 10-foot lanes is what that's going to be in the future. So there's not much room, and that's going to cause a backup. And then again, I keep thinking about the number of schools in such a short distance. You've got the BVP elementaries, you've got BF Norton, and you got the high school. And it is a nightmare, and I have personal knowledge, especially when it comes to BVP, not BVP, but BF Norton, and what goes on there, and what I've been told. So at this point, I can't give my blessing to this plan at this point. And the one thing I want to reiterate as far as, because Mr. Partington made a mention of it, that the master plan is a conceptual plan. It's a place where we start, okay? And we try to work it as we move along to something that is agreeable by this board, and which is in not just the best interest of the applicant. In this case, it's the students, who I will commend them, because every student that came before us and spoke with us, and I see Mr. Silva sitting here, okay? And I talked with him after the first meeting. What a great job he did. So BVP is really putting out some really great students. And I commend them and their teachers for the excellent work that they've done. But again, at this point in time, I cannot give my blessing to this particular proposal. Thank you. Yes. So having said that, I'm willing to entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So the planning department drafted a proposed decision. You've all made a lot of comments tonight. I think at this point, you could take a vote and you could adopt this decision, or you could take a vote and ask the planning board to add some of the comments that you've just made, some of the additional testimony that's been made tonight, but incorporating what you've just discussed particularly. So the deadline to make a decision is today. So you have to actually vote, but you do not need to adopt a written decision until, maybe the next time you meet, and that's fine. So it's up to you. You can accept this, you can edit it, you can take things out, add items, or you can vote generally on what you've just discussed, and the planning board can come back with edits. And I think we should discuss that.
Okay. Well, my preference would be, okay, that we could take a vote this evening and that the staff draft the decision.
Are you comfortable with everything that's in here now? I mean,
I can't speak for anybody else, but
Right.
I'm fairly comfortable with what's in this,
Okay.
okay? But again, this is not unusual. We've done it more in many occasions when we've asked the planning staff to draft a decision for our blessing.
yes, the state law requires you to vote tonight, but you can issue a written decision after that. So if that's your feeling, that generally this is acceptable, they can add some of the other comments that you all made tonight, and then you could adopt the final decision. Written decision.
Anybody on the
written
board that did
decision.
not get a chance to read it? Because it came in kind of late.
I'm not quite sure I understand all that, but I just want to say that there are 4 memoranda, I believe, should be made a part of the motion. March 25th, these are all from Mr. Stevens and Mr. Modica to the board. First is 25 March 2022. It is 35 pages in length. And also with it, that memorandum's attachment A, which is an 11 additional pages in length. I believe this includes pictures. The next memorandum is dated 11/10/22. It's 20 pages in length. And then there are 2 memoranda this evening, dated 11/30/2022. One of them is 5 pages in length, and the second one is 16 pages in length. No, that's done, and that's just my thought.
I'm sorry, I was reading here. Are you including the November 30th, 2022 memorandum that we received?
2 of them.
Well, no, this
That's
is,
5 pages. How many pages?
no, this is, it also includes some commentary
If you go to the
from,
last page, how many pages, Mr. Chairman?
well, actually, 1, 2, 3, there's 4 pages. 5, I'm sorry, 5 pages.
Mr. Chair, what's the, hang on. The one yeah, that's what I had said. One is 5 pages. in
No,
length
that's why I
and one
asked. I
is-
said, was this, I was,
Okay, there are only, I believe, only 2 memoranda that we have. that
Okay.
We got tonight.
I apologize.
I think you have to turn your mic on or talk. I can't hear you.
There are only 2 memoranda that we got tonight.
Well, one's a memoranda and one is a draft decision.
Well, okay, we're getting it. I was treating that second one, which is, I believe, 16 pages in length, as a memorandum. And it's in fact on page 16 where there's a draft motion, if we're on the same page. no
Correct.
pun intended. Okay.
That's the draft decision.
And it may be advisable to not have all of that on there. I just bring it up to provide a framework for the justification for the vote.
Well, yeah, I think this discussion is helpful. So what you're saying is, you're going to vote tonight. You want to incorporate by reference the various memoranda that have been presented to you over the last year or so. And that, do you want them to add some of the comments that you made tonight? Okay, so you need to vote tonight. You need to actually make a decision. And then, I guess the next time you meet, which I believe is in January, you would adopt the actual written decision. Oh, December 13th.
Right.
Better.
Mr. Ponnington, you have a question?
First, I want to, my understanding is that I realize that we have an amended master plan, but as part of the record, I would assume that everything that's been presented is all part of the record.
It is part of the record. They want to make it part of the decision.
Oh, okay. All right. And I would like a confirmation that everyone has had a chance to read the proposed decision before adopting it.
Well, they're not going to adopt it tonight. They're going to adopt it on December 13th.
Well, that's what I'm trying, because I heard that I barely hear anything definitive on that. If that's what the board's decision is, then fine. I didn't really get a definitive response on it.
So my understanding of the statute is that they can make a decision,
Yes.
and then there can be time to actually
Yes. Right.
adopt a written decision.
Yes.
So
correct.
if we're on the same page with that, I think it's important for us to get this right. And by the way, on December 13th, if you don't like what's in the proposed decision, you can make changes, and you'll have it more in advance than what you saw today. So you make a decision based on everything you've heard, and, loosely based on this decision and the memoranda, and then you're directing the planning staff to incorporate some of your comments tonight particularly, and anything else that, both the parents, students, and residents have said.
Well, just for the record, then, I just want to place on this record that to the extent I did not have a chance to read it. I got it at after 3 o'clock. I was in the middle of a couple of other things. So just for the record, to the extent that anything that's in that agreement that does not reflect what's been stated to date, I object to.
Okay. Well, what my intention has been right from the beginning to see just a few minutes ago was we're bound to, and we have to make a decision this evening. We have to take a vote. And in the past, we've asked, especially with a project or an application that comes to us like this that's so involved, we've asked the staff and also our solicitor to review, and put together for us a findings of fact and which is part of the decision, okay?
I understand that. All I'm saying is, and I appreciate, I know you've done it in the past.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that because I have not had a chance to look at it, that I just want to preserve my right in the future, if what I see does not incorporate or says something outside of what's been presented already, I just want to put on the record that I would object to those comments.
So I would suggest that the planning department will provide Mr. Partington with a copy of the draft decision.
I have it.
Not
The
the
revised.
final one, not the
Oh,
final.
yeah, okay. All right.
Several days before your next meeting, and that he provide written comments, objections, additions that he proposes, which you may or may not accept.
Okay, my
Okay.
question is, how can we have that prepared in advance of that meeting on the 13th?
How can you?
Yes.
Well, Glenn's pretty good about putting
Yeah,
things
I mean,
together.
look what I got today.
So
I got
what we will do is.
50 pages
is
today.
Email him with our comments? Is that what we want to do?
No, the planning staff is gonna incorporate, they
Oh,
heard what
okay.
you said. They're going to provide it to you several days in advance, along with Mr. Partington.
Gotcha.
Everybody comes back on the 13th, and you decide whether you can accept what's been written, if you want to make any edits. Mr. Partington's going to propose written comments and challenges, and you can accept them or not. That's up to you. It's your decision.
Thank you, thank you.
Just to clarify things, okay, when we take a vote on a particular application, okay, I will get a call and sometimes an email from Glenn, who will forward to me the written decision with the findings of facts, okay? And if it looks okay in the past, because I'm talking for something like the zoning requests and so on, things like that, okay? If I'm in agreement with it, he'll type it up or make any revisions that I think need to be made, and then I will sign off on it. In this case, this is a much different situation where we've got so much that's involved here that I want to make sure that the entire board is in agreement.
Yes.
What is put into that written decision.
Right. So you're doing the same thing that you always do. There's just a time limitation tonight that is not typical. You're not usually up against the final day. So typically, you vote, you say something like, we incorporate the findings and the recommendations of the planning staff, and then Mr. Modica drafts a decision, and you never see it again.
That's right.
We want
No,
you to
that's
see
why I
it.
asked that question. That's
Right,
because
we
don't-
want you to see it, we want you to, everybody to be in agreement, we want Mr. Partington to be able to challenge or, you know, whatever he wants to do. And then we come back on the 13th, and it's your decision. If you can accept his challenges, you can, because there's also a record, by the way, so.
Is there a time constraint on that?
Reasonable.
Reasonable.
And I think 13 days is plenty reasonable.
Okay.
And I think Mr. Partington agrees with that, correct? Yes.
Everybody, does everyone understand and in agreement?
Well, so in other words, there's no verbiage or regarding a motion. You're just going to call a vote to, is that correct?
No, someone.
I would ask, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
That someone make the following motion. I mean, based on your comments, I'm going with a denial because I don't think it can go any other way. The motion would be that the board denies the master plan application based on the draft planning board decision, all memoranda previously submitted, and any new testimony and comments provided by the board tonight, and direct the planning staff to draft a decision, a formal written decision for adoption on 12/13.
So moved.
There you go.
Second. Second.
Harry, are you okay?
Yeah, just one wrinkle. The vote with a negative motion, the vote is in reverse.
Right. In other words, if it's a motion to deny.
Yes is a no, and no is a yes.
No, I would be to deny.
Right, so.
Oh, you deny, okay.
So if you say deny, then you will, and if you're in agreement with the denial, you will vote yes.
Right, A or yes. Yes. Do you have a second?
Eh?
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Yeah,
I second it.
I would take a roll call.
I
vote.
second Mr.
I
Costa's
intend to.
motion.
Okay,
Roll call.
okay. All right, I have a motion by Mr. Costa, and I have a second by Mr., excuse me, Mr. McDonald. Oh, I can take 2 seconds, and also by, no? Okay. Thank you. So I will now take the vote, okay? Ms. Vlasic?
I cannot approve this plan, no.
No,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
okay. Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Scown?
Yes.
Mr. Bush? Ms. Reese?
Yes.
Mr. D'Ambrosia?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes, deny.
And the chair votes yes. The motion carries.
Motion to adjourn.
Wait, I just need double check, make sure this.
That's it.
Oh, there's also public comment? I don't know. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to deny. Deny, excuse me,
Move
to
to
adjourn.
adjourn.
To adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, motion to adjourn.
Motion by Ms. Fraschitz, seconded by Mr. Scown, and approved by entire board. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.